It was a chilly Thursday night in Palo Alto, and Elon Musk was leaving the Tesla headquarters after a long day of meetings and brainstorming sessions. He parked his custom Model X in a quiet, dimly lit corner of the underground lot, hoping for a moment of solitude before heading home. The hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional distant beep of a car alarm were the only sounds that accompanied him as he approached his vehicle. As he neared the car, he noticed something strange. A small pile of belongings, a worn duffel bag, a crumpled blanket, and an empty water bottle, sat just a few feet away from the passenger door. His brow furrowed as he scanned the area. That's when he saw her. Curled up against the sleek black door of his car was a young woman. She was fast asleep, her body wrapped tightly in a thin, tattered coat. Her hair, braided and neatly tied, framed her face, which was streaked with exhaustion. Her hands were tucked under her head, as if the concrete floor were the most comfortable bed she had ever known. Elon froze. This wasn't something he saw every day. Not in the heart of Silicon Valley, surrounded by innovation, wealth, and ambition. For a moment, he just stared, his mind racing with questions. Who was she? Why was she here? And, most importantly, what should he do? His first instinct was to call security. This was private property, after all. But as he stood there, something stopped him. There was a vulnerability to her that he couldn't ignore. Her presence didn't feel threatening. It felt tragic. He thought about the stark contrast between her reality and his, a world of privilege, power, and billion-dollar dreams versus one where sleeping on cold concrete was a necessity. He knelt down carefully, his shadow falling over her face. "Excuse me," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. The woman stirred but didn't wake. He tried again, a little louder this time. "Hey, are you okay?" Her eyes fluttered open, and for a brief moment, confusion washed over her face. She sat up abruptly, clutching her coat tighter around her. I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice hoarse. "I didn't mean to. I'll leave." Elon held up a hand to stop her. "It's okay," he said gently. "You don't need to go. I just want to make sure you're all right." She hesitated, studying him with wary eyes. In the dim light, she could see the sharp lines of his face, the familiar features she'd seen 100 times on television and social media. Recognition flickered in her gaze. You're Elon Musk." He nodded, unsure of how to respond. "And you are?" "Maya," she said quietly. Her voice carried a mixture of embarrassment and defiance, as though she was used to defending her existence in spaces where she didn't belong. "Maya Johnson." "What are you doing here, Maya?" he asked, his tone curious rather than accusatory. She looked away, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her coat. "I didn't have anywhere else to go," she admitted. "I just needed somewhere safe to sleep for the night. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." Elon nodded slowly, trying to process her words. He glanced at the duffel bag and blanket, signs of a life lived on the margins. "How long have you been out here?" "Not long," she said quickly, though her voice lacked conviction. "A few weeks, maybe." He frowned. The thought of someone living like this, especially in a place as affluent as Silicon Valley, struck a nerve. He didn't know her story, but he wanted to. "Have you eaten anything today?" She shook her head, and for the first time, he noticed how gaunt she looked. Her cheeks were hollow, her eyes shadowed with fatigue. Without thinking, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Come on," he said, standing up. "Let's get you something to eat." Maya blinked up at him, her expression a mix of surprise and suspicion. "Why would you do that?" she asked cautiously. Elon shrugged. "Because I can. And because no one should have to sleep next to a car to feel safe." She hesitated for a moment, then slowly got to her feet. As she gathered her belongings, Elon noticed the way her hands trembled, not from fear but from cold and hunger. They walked in silence to a nearby diner that stayed open late. The staff seemed stunned to see Elon Musk stroll in, accompanied by a disheveled young woman. Ignoring the stares, he led her to a booth and handed her a menu. "Order whatever you want," he said. Maya hesitated, scanning the menu as if she were afraid to choose something too expensive. Finally, she settled on a simple meal, a burger, fries, and a cup of coffee. Elon ordered the same, though his mind was elsewhere. As they waited for their food, he turned to her. "So, Maya, what's your story?" She looked at him, her guard still up. "Why do you care?" "Because," he said, leaning forward slightly, "I've always believed that the most interesting people are the ones who've been through the hardest times. And something tells me you have a story worth hearing." For a long moment, she said nothing, her gaze fixed on the table. Then, as if the weight of silence was too much to bear, she began to speak. And Elon Musk listened. Maya's voice was soft at first, her words hesitant as if testing Elon's sincerity. But as the warmth of the diner and the aroma of fresh coffee began to ease her nerves, she started to open up. "I grew up in Oakland," she began, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the edge of the table. "It was just me and my mom. She worked 2 jobs, housekeeping during the day and waitressing at night, to keep a roof over our heads. She always said education was the way out. She used to save every penny to buy me books, even when it meant skipping meals herself." Elon nodded, his attention unwavering. "She sounds like an incredible woman." "She was," Maya said, her lips twitching into a small, wistful smile. "She wanted me to be something big, an engineer, a scientist, someone who could change the world. And for a while, I thought I could. I got into Stanford on a full scholarship. I was studying aerospace engineering." Elon's eyebrows lifted in genuine surprise. "Stanford? That's impressive. So, what happened?" Maya's smile faded, and her hands dropped into her lap. "Life happened. My mom got sick, stage 4 breast cancer. I couldn't focus on school knowing she was at home fighting for her life. I dropped out to take care of her." She paused, swallowing hard as the memory seemed to choke her. "The medical bills piled up. I tried to keep up with them, but even with insurance, it was impossible. After she passed," her voice cracked, and she looked away, blinking rapidly. "After she passed, everything fell apart. The bills, the debt, the grief. I lost the apartment. I lost everything." Elon's chest tightened as he listened. He could see the pain etched into her features, the weight of her story pressing down on her. He didn't know what to say. Words felt inadequate in the face of such loss. "And that's how you ended up here?" he asked gently. Maya nodded. "I've been bouncing around ever since. Shelters, couch surfing when I could. But most nights it's just me in the streets. I found this parking lot last week. It's quiet, and no one bothers me. At least, until tonight." She offered a weak, self-deprecating chuckle. The waitress arrived with their food, and Maya's eyes lit up at the sight of the burger and fries. She mumbled a soft, "Thank you," before taking a cautious bite. Elon watched as she ate slowly at first, then more eagerly, as if her body had forgotten the taste of real food. As she ate, Elon's mind churned. Maya wasn't just another person down on her luck. She was brilliant, determined, and resilient, qualities he admired. Her story stirred something in him, a sense of responsibility he couldn't ignore. "Maya," he said after a moment, his tone thoughtful, "you mentioned studying aerospace engineering. Do you still want to work in that field?" She hesitated, wiping her hands on a napkin. "I don't know. I mean, I did. It was my dream. But that feels like a lifetime ago. I don't think someone like me has a place in that world anymore." "Why not?" Elon pressed, his voice firm but not unkind. "Look at me," she said, gesturing to herself. "I'm homeless. I don't have a degree. I don't even have a resume anymore. Who's going to take me seriously?" Elon leaned back, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You'd be surprised. Sometimes, all it takes is one chance." Maya frowned, clearly skeptical. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Elon said, leaning forward, "that I'm willing to give you that chance. If you're interested, I'd like to bring you to SpaceX for a week. No promises, no guarantees, just an opportunity to show me what you can do." Maya stared at him, her expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Elon replied. "But it won't be easy. SpaceX is one of the most demanding places in the world to work. You'll have to prove yourself, not just to me, but to everyone there. Think you're up for it?" Maya hesitated, the weight of his offer settling over her. A part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to grasp at the lifeline he was offering. But another part of her, the part that had been beaten down by years of hardship, warned her to be cautious. "What's the catch?" she asked finally. "There's no catch," Elon said simply. "You have talent, and I want to see what you can do with it. That's all." Maya studied him, searching his face for any hint of ulterior motives. All she saw was sincerity and a spark of curiosity. Slowly, she nodded. "All right," she said. "I'll do it." Elon smiled. "Good. We'll start tomorrow." As they left the diner, Maya couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of a new chapter in her life. And Elon, as he walked her back to the parking lot, couldn't shake the feeling that meeting Maya might change both of their lives in ways neither of them could have predicted. The morning air was crisp as the sun began to rise over the sprawling cityscape of Los Angeles. Maya stood outside SpaceX headquarters, clutching the straps of her duffel bag like a lifeline. Her heart pounded in her chest, and doubt crept into her mind with every passing second. She had slept in a small motel room Elon had arranged for her the previous night, the first proper bed she'd had in months. It felt surreal, almost too good to be true. Now, standing in front of one of the most prestigious companies in the world, she couldn't help but feel out of place. The glass doors slid open, and Elon appeared, his usual brisk energy radiating from him. He wore his signature black jacket and jeans, looking every bit the tech mogul she had seen on TV. "Good morning," he said with a nod, his tone casual, as if this were just another day for him. Maya managed a faint smile. "Morning. Ready for your first day?" he asked, gesturing for her to follow him inside. I guess so," she replied, her voice faltering slightly. "I'm not really sure what to expect." Elon chuckled as they entered the sleek, futuristic lobby of SpaceX. Employees bustled about, their voices buzzing with excitement and purpose. "Expect to work hard," he said, "and don't be afraid to ask questions." Everyone here was new at some point. As they walked, Maya couldn't help but marvel at the environment. Screens displayed live feeds of rocket launches and Mars simulations. Scale models of spacecraft hung from the ceiling, and the air buzzed with a sense of ambition that felt almost tangible. Elon led her to a small conference room where a woman in her late 30s was waiting. She had sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately commanded respect. "Maya, this is Dr. Sarah Bennett," Elon said. "She's one of our lead engineers." "Sarah, this is Maya Johnson. She'll be shadowing you for the week." Sarah's eyebrows lifted slightly, but she didn't question Elon's decision. Instead, she extended a hand to Maya. "Nice to meet you, Maya," she said briskly. Maya shook her hand, trying to ignore the nervous sweat on her palms. "Nice to meet you, too." "Let's get started," Sarah said, motioning for Maya to follow her. As they moved through the labyrinth of offices, labs, and testing facilities, Maya felt overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it all. Sarah was already rattling off a list of tasks and expectations, her tone brisk but not unkind. "You'll spend today observing," Sarah explained as they entered a room filled with engineers working on the Falcon 9. "Take notes, ask questions, and get familiar with how we do things here. Tomorrow, we'll start assigning you some basic tasks." Maya nodded, trying to absorb everything. She felt like an outsider in a world that was so far removed from the life she had been living. Yet, at the same time, there was a flicker of excitement. This was her chance to prove herself. The day passed in a blur of technical jargon, diagrams, and introductions. Maya listened intently, jotting down notes in a small notebook Elon had given her. By lunchtime, her head was spinning with information, but she refused to let herself feel discouraged. As she sat alone in the cafeteria, picking at a sandwich, Elon appeared, holding a tray of his own. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. She shook her head, and he slid into the seat across from her. "How's it going so far?" "It's a lot," she admitted. "Everyone here is so smart. I feel like I don't belong." Elon tilted his head, studying her. "Let me tell you something," he said. "When I started SpaceX, people thought I was crazy. They said I didn't know what I was doing, that it was impossible to build reusable rockets. And you know what? They were right. I didn't know what I was doing, but I learned. I surrounded myself with people who were smarter than me, and I kept pushing forward. That's what you're here to do. Learn and push forward. Maya absorbed his words, her grip on her sandwich loosening slightly. Do you really think I can do this? I wouldn't have brought you here if I didn't, Elon said firmly. But it's not about what I think. It's about what you believe you can do. For the first time since she had arrived, Maya felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe she did belong here, or at least, maybe she could. By the end of the day, Maya was exhausted, but it was the kind of exhaustion that came from hard work and determination. As she left SpaceX, she looked up at the sky, where the stars were just beginning to appear. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to dream again. The second day began with Maya arriving early. She stood outside SpaceX headquarters, the rising sun casting a golden glow over the building's modern exterior. For a moment, she took a deep breath, letting the quiet of the morning steady her nerves. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Engineers, scientists, and technicians moved with purpose, their conversations filled with words like orbital trajectory and payload optimization. Maya was nervous but determined. Today wasn't just about observing, it was about doing. When she met Sarah in the testing lab, the lead engineer wasted no time. "All right, Maya," Sarah said, handing her a tablet filled with schematics and data. "Today, you'll assist in running diagnostics on one of our Falcon 9 engines. It's basic, but it's important. We can't afford mistakes." Maya nodded, clutching the tablet tightly. "Understood." Sarah explained the process as they walked toward the massive test bay where a Falcon 9 engine was suspended. The engine looked like a mechanical giant, its intricate network of pipes and components gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Diagnostics are about precision," Sarah said. "Every number matters. If something's off, even by a fraction, it could mean disaster during launch." Maya swallowed hard. "No pressure, right?" Sarah paired her with a junior engineer named Carlos, who had a friendly demeanor and an encouraging smile. "Don't worry," Carlos said as they began. "I'll walk you through it. We all started somewhere." With his guidance, Maya began inputting data from the sensors attached to the engine. At first, the numbers and charts felt overwhelming, but she forced herself to focus. She thought back to her days at Stanford, to the late nights spent poring over textbooks and equations. That part of her, the part that loved solving problems, was still there. Halfway through the diagnostics, Carlos handed her the tablet. "Your turn. Check the thermal pressure readings against the baseline. If there's a discrepancy, flag it." Maya hesitated, then nodded. She scanned the data, her eyes darting between the readings and the baseline values. It took her a few minutes, but she found an anomaly. "Here," she said, pointing to the screen. "The pressure in chamber 4 is 0.2% higher than the baseline." Carlos leaned over, his expression shifting to one of approval. "Good catch. Let's double-check it." Together, they confirmed the discrepancy. Sarah, who had been observing from a distance, walked over. "What's the issue?" Maya explained, her voice steady despite her nerves. Sarah listened carefully, then nodded. "Good work. That kind of attention to detail is what keeps rockets from exploding." The praise caught Maya off guard. She wasn't used to hearing it, especially not in such a high-stakes environment. For the first time, she felt like she was contributing to something meaningful. The rest of the day flew by. Maya continued working alongside Carlos and the team, her confidence growing with each task. By the time they wrapped up, she was tired but exhilarated. As she packed up her things, Sarah approached her. "You did well today," she said, "but don't let it go to your head. Tomorrow will be harder." Maya smiled faintly. "I wouldn't expect anything less." That evening, as Maya walked back to her motel, she replayed the day's events in her mind. She had been afraid of failure, of being judged, but the team at SpaceX had treated her with respect and given her a chance to prove herself. When she reached her room, she opened the notebook she had been using to jot down notes and thoughts. At the top of a fresh page, she wrote, "Day 2. Believe in yourself. You can do this." Lying in bed, Maya stared at the ceiling, a small smile on her lips. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of purpose, a reason to keep going. And somewhere across town, Elon Musk sat in his office, reviewing the day's reports. When he saw Sarah's notes about Maya, he smiled. She's got potential, he murmured to himself. The wheels were turning, not just for SpaceX, but for Maya's life. Something extraordinary was beginning to take shape, and neither of them could fully grasp where it would lead. The next morning, Maya arrived at SpaceX feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Yesterday's successes gave her a small boost of confidence, but Sarah's parting words echoed in her mind. Tomorrow will be harder. As she entered the bustling lab, Sarah greeted her with a nod, holding a tablet filled with assignments. "Morning, Maya. Today's task is more complex," she said. "We're running thermal stress simulations on the new heat shields for Starship. You'll be responsible for identifying any weak points in the material data." Maya furrowed her brow. Thermal stress simulations were no joke. Misinterpreting the data could lead to catastrophic failure during re-entry. Sarah handed her a laptop and gestured toward a desk near the engineering team. "Carlos will check your results at the end, but this is on you. Don't be afraid to ask questions if you get stuck." Maya nodded, taking her seat. The screen in front of her displayed a dizzying array of graphs, numbers, and 3D models of heat shields subjected to extreme temperatures. Her mind whirred as she began analyzing the data. At first, the task felt overwhelming. She had to recall equations and concepts she hadn't touched in years. Her hands trembled slightly as she input formulas, double-checking her calculations. Hours passed, and the hum of activity around her became white noise. Just as she was beginning to feel confident, she hit a snag. One section of the data didn't make sense, an anomaly in the stress distribution graph. She recalculated twice, but the numbers still didn't add up. Frustration bubbled inside her. "Need a hand?" Carlos's voice broke through her thoughts. Maya hesitated, pride and fear of looking incompetent battling within her. But she reminded herself of Elon's words: ask questions, learn, and push forward. "Yes," she admitted. "I'm stuck on this section. The stress distribution doesn't match the expected range." Carlos pulled up a chair and examined her screen. After a moment, he pointed to a line of code in the simulation. "Here's your issue. The input for the material density is off by a decimal point. Easy fix." Maya stared at the screen, feeling a mix of relief and embarrassment. "Thanks," she said. "Don't sweat it," Carlos replied with a grin. "We all make mistakes. What matters is catching them before they cause bigger problems." With his guidance, Maya corrected the error and completed the simulation. When Sarah reviewed her results later, she gave a curt nod of approval. "Good job. You spotted a critical error and resolved it. That's what we need in this field, problem solvers." Maya felt a swell of pride at the compliment, but the day wasn't over yet. After lunch, Sarah introduced a new challenge: running a real-time test on a heat shield prototype. The test involved exposing the shield to a simulated re-entry environment in the lab's thermal chamber. Maya would monitor the process and flag any immediate concerns. Standing before the massive thermal chamber, Maya's nerves returned. The machine roared to life, its interior glowing as temperatures soared to mimic the intense heat of atmospheric re-entry. Maya's screen displayed live data feeds, temperature gradients, stress levels, and material integrity. At first, everything seemed fine. The heat shield held steady as the temperature climbed. But then, a sudden spike appeared in the stress readings. "Sarah," Maya called, her voice tense. "We've got an anomaly in Quadrant 3. Stress levels are climbing too fast." Sarah hurried over, her eyes narrowing at the data. "Good catch. Shut it down." Maya's hands moved instinctively, following the shutdown protocol Sarah had explained earlier. The chamber powered down with a low hum, and the heat shield inside began to cool. Carlos approached, looking impressed. "Nice work, Maya. If you hadn't caught that, we could have damaged the prototype, or worse." Sarah examined the heat shield closely, then turned to Maya. "That was quick thinking. You stayed calm under pressure. Not everyone can do that." Maya felt a surge of accomplishment. For the first time, she believed she might really have what it takes to succeed in this environment. That evening, as Maya walked back to her motel, she replayed the day's events in her mind. It had been challenging, more than she'd anticipated, but she had risen to the occasion. Sitting on the edge of the bed, She opened her notebook and wrote, Day 3. Every problem has a solution. Stay focused. Stay calm. Her journey at SpaceX was just beginning, but for the first time in years, Maya felt like she was on the right path. She was learning, growing, and proving to herself, and to others, that she was capable of more than she'd ever imagined. Across town, Elon sat in his office, reviewing the day's reports. When he saw Sarah's notes praising Maya's performance, he smiled to himself. She's tougher than she looks, he muttered. Little did Maya know, her resilience and determination were beginning to catch the attention of everyone around her, including the man who had given her this opportunity. Maya awoke before dawn, her notebook still open beside her. The words she had written the night before, stay focused, stay calm, lingered in her mind as she prepared for the day ahead. Each morning brought new challenges, but today felt different. It wasn't just about completing tasks anymore. It was about proving she belonged. At SpaceX, the energy in the air was different, heavier. Teams huddled together in urgent conversations. Engineers darted back and forth with tablets, and Sarah's usually composed expression was lined with tension. What's going on? Maya asked as she entered the main lab. Launch prep, Carlos said, barely glancing up from his screen. We've got a Falcon 9 scheduled to launch in 2 days, and there's a hiccup with the guidance system. Everyone's on edge. Sarah appeared moments later, her tone clipped. Maya, you're with me today. We're running a full diagnostic on the guidance algorithm. If there's an error, we need to find it fast. Maya's stomach flipped. This wasn't just another test or simulation. This was real. A mistake here could cost millions of dollars and months of... Sarah, she called. Her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. I found something. The algorithm is showing a deviation of 0.03% from the baseline. It's small, but it could cause a drift during ascent. Sarah rushed over, her sharp eyes scanning the data. Good catch, she said, her voice laced with urgency. Let's isolate the issue and cross-check it with the roll algorithm. Maya's fingers flew over the keyboard as she worked to pinpoint the source of the error. The room seemed to fade away as she focused entirely on the task at hand. When she finally found the problem, a miscalculation in the software's predictive model, Sarah gave her a rare smile. Got it, Sarah said. I'll have the software team patch this immediately. You may have just saved this launch, Maya. Maya exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The tension in her shoulders eased, replaced by a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in years. Later that evening, as Maya packed up her things, she overheard 2 engineers talking near the coffee machine. Can you believe Musk brought her in off the streets? One of them whispered. Yeah, the other replied. I don't care how smart she is. This isn't a charity. The word stung more than Maya cared to admit. She had expected to face challenges at SpaceX, but she hadn't anticipated this. The lingering doubt of others, the whispers that questioned her right to be here. She left the lab in silence, the high of her earlier success dampened by the weight of their words. Back at her motel, Maya sat on the bed, staring at the notebook in her lap. Her pen hovered over the page, but for the first time since she'd started writing in it, the words wouldn't come. Her phone buzzed, and she saw a text from an unknown number. Maya, it's Elon. Heard you nailed the guidance issue today. Great work. Keep it up. For a moment, she just stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Finally, she typed back, Thank you. It means a lot. The reply came almost instantly. You belong here, Maya. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that. Maya closed her phone and opened her notebook again. This time, the words came easily. Day 4, prove them wrong. Keep going. As she turned out the light and lay down to sleep, Maya made a silent promise to herself. No matter what challenges or doubts came her way, she would keep pushing forward. Because for the first time in a long time, she believed in her own potential, and she wasn't about to let anyone take that from her. The morning buzz at SpaceX felt different today. The Falcon 9 launch was drawing closer, and the entire facility was a hive of activity. Engineers darted from one lab to another, technicians double-checked equipment, and managers barked orders to ensure every detail was accounted for. Maya entered the lab with her head held high. Elon's message from the night before was still fresh in her mind, his words echoing with quiet reassurance. You belong here. She knew whispers and doubts might linger, but she was determined to focus on the work that mattered. As she settled into her workstation, Sarah approached with a clipboard. Maya, she began, her tone firm but not unfriendly. There's a meeting in conference room 2 in 15 minutes. Elon wants you there. Maya blinked. Me? In a leadership meeting? Sarah raised an eyebrow. You spotted the guidance issue yesterday, and that earned you a seat. Don't overthink it. Just be ready to present your findings. The gravity of the moment hit Maya like a jolt of electricity. She wasn't just fixing simulations anymore. She was stepping into the spotlight. The conference room was sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking SpaceX's test site. At the center of the room stood a long glass table surrounded by some of the sharpest minds in aerospace engineering. Elon Musk sat at the head of the table, his presence magnetic yet approachable. When Maya entered, she felt every eye in the room turn toward her. She clutched her notebook tightly, forcing herself to breathe evenly. Elon gestured for her to take a seat near him. All right, let's get started, he said, his tone brisk. Maya, walk us through the guidance anomaly and how you resolved it. Maya's hands trembled as she opened her notebook. She took a moment to steady herself before launching into her explanation. As she spoke, her voice grew more confident. She detailed the discrepancy she had found, the calculations she used to identify the source, and the steps she took to resolve it. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment before Elon nodded. Good work, he said simply. That level of detail saved us a lot of trouble. Everyone, take note, this is the kind of problem-solving we need more of. A ripple of acknowledgement passed through the room, and Maya felt a swell of pride. For the first time, she felt not just like an observer but like a contributor to something extraordinary. After the meeting, Sarah pulled Maya aside. Don't let that go to your head, she said, though there was a hint of a smile in her voice. Leadership takes more than solving problems. It's about working with others, even when it's not easy. Maya nodded, but her next assignment tested that lesson almost immediately. She was placed on a team tasked with final checks on the Falcon 9's telemetry system, working alongside 2 senior engineers, Carlos and a brusque, no-nonsense man named Frank. Frank wasted no time making his feelings clear. I don't know why Musk brought you into that meeting, he said, his tone dripping with skepticism. We've got this under control. Maya bit back a sharp reply. Instead, she focused on the task at hand, reviewing telemetry feeds and cross-referencing them with launch parameters. Frank's dismissive attitude grated on her nerves, but she reminded herself of Elon's advice. Learn and push forward. As the team worked, Maya noticed a minor error in the telemetry synchronization. Something so subtle it could have easily been missed. Frank, she said carefully, I think we have a timing mismatch here. The signal from one of the ground stations is delayed by 0.5 seconds. Frank barely glanced at her. That's within tolerance. It's fine. Maya hesitated, then spoke up again. But if the rocket encounters unexpected turbulence during ascent, that delay could throw off the trajectory adjustments. Shouldn't we adjust for it now? Carlos chimed in. She's got a point, Frank. Better safe than sorry. Grudgingly, Frank relented, and they corrected the timing. Later, when Sarah reviewed their report, she praised Maya for her thoroughness. Frank didn't apologize, but he gave Maya a curt nod as they wrapped up. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That night, Maya reflected on the day's events. She had faced doubt and resistance, but she had also earned respect, piece by piece, moment by moment. As she wrote in her notebook, her thoughts flowed easily. Day 5. Leadership isn't just about being right. It's about standing your ground, listening to others, and staying focused on what matters. Her journey at SpaceX was far from over, but she felt a shift within herself. She was no longer just a woman trying to prove she belonged. She was becoming a part of the team, one step at a time. And as Elon reviewed the day's progress reports late into the night, he couldn't help but smile. Maya was proving to be everything he had hoped for, and perhaps more. The countdown to the Falcon 9 launch ticked closer, and the pace at SpaceX intensified. The facility was abuzz with final preparations, checklists being reviewed, and systems undergoing rigorous tests. Maya's confidence was growing, but so was the pressure. As she walked into the control room that morning, Sarah met her with a serious expression. "Maya, we've got a new assignment for you. It's a big one." Maya's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" "We need you to lead the backup diagnostics team for the launch. If anything goes wrong during liftoff, your team will analyze the issue in real time and provide recommendations." "It's a critical role," Sarah explained. The weight of the responsibility hit Maya immediately. Leading a team during a launch? She wasn't sure she was ready. "Why me?" she asked, her voice quieter than she intended. "Elon insisted," Sarah replied simply. "He trusts your instincts, and frankly, so do I. Don't overthink it, just focus on the data." Maya nodded, her mind racing. Trust was one thing, but this was another level entirely. The backup diagnostics team consisted of 4 engineers. Carlos, a steady presence who had become a quiet supporter of Maya; Priya, an expert in propulsion systems; Sam, a telemetry specialist; and Victor, who seemed indifferent to Maya's leadership. As the team gathered for their first briefing, Maya felt the need to address the elephant in the room. "I know some of you might have doubts about me leading this team," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "But my goal is simple: to make sure this launch succeeds. I'm here to listen, to collaborate, and to make the best decisions for the mission. Let's focus on the work." Carlos nodded in support, while Priya offered a small smile. Victor, however, remained silent, his arms crossed over his chest. "All right," Maya continued. "Let's review our responsibilities. Priya, propulsion anomalies are your priority. Sam, keep telemetry clean and alert us to any delays. Carlos, I'll need you to double-check all data streams for inconsistencies. Victor, you'll handle onboard system diagnostics. Let's make sure everything is locked down before the final launch sequence." The team dispersed to their tasks, and Maya felt a flicker of hope. She didn't need everyone to like her. She just needed them to trust her enough to do the job. As part of the final preparations, the team ran a full-scale launch simulation that afternoon. Every system was tested, and Maya's team was tasked with identifying potential failures. An hour into the simulation, Priya flagged an issue with the second-stage engine. "I'm seeing irregular pressure levels here," she said, her voice tense. "It could lead to a loss of thrust during stage separation." Victor chimed in, his tone skeptical. "That's a borderline reading. It might not even be an issue." Maya stepped in quickly. "Borderline or not, we can't ignore it. Priya, dig deeper into the engine diagnostics. Victor, cross-check her findings with the onboard pressure sensors. Let's confirm this before making a recommendation." Minutes felt like hours as the team worked. When the results came in, Priya's concerns were validated. The pressure irregularity could indeed cause a thrust imbalance. Maya reported the findings to Sarah and the lead engineers, who adjusted the engine calibration accordingly. After the simulation, Sarah pulled Maya aside. "You handled that well," she said. "Leadership isn't about knowing everything. It's about making sure the right voices are heard. Keep that up." Maya's chest swelled with pride. It wasn't a flawless day, but it was a step in the right direction. Later that evening, Maya found Victor in the break room, staring out the window at the towering Falcon 9 rocket. "Hey," she said, approaching cautiously. "Thanks for your work today. I know it's not easy to pivot during a simulation like that." Victor sighed, his posture rigid. "I've been here 5 years, Maya. I've worked on more launches than I can count. And now I'm reporting to someone who's been here, what, a week?" Maya nodded, taking in his frustration. "I get it," she said softly. "I know I haven't earned your trust yet, but I'm not here to undermine you or anyone else. I'm here to learn, to contribute, and to make sure this mission succeeds." "That's it." Victor finally looked at her, his expression softening slightly. "You're lucky Elon's got your back," he said, though there was no malice in his voice this time. "I am," Maya admitted. "But trust isn't about luck, it's about consistency. Give me time, and I'll earn yours." Victor didn't respond, but as he left the break room, Maya felt like she had planted a small seed. That night, Maya sat in her motel room, replaying the day's events in her mind. She had made progress with her team, but she knew the road ahead would still be challenging. In her notebook, she wrote, Day 6, trust is built one moment at a time. Today was a start. The launch was now less than 24 hours away. As Maya turned out the light, she whispered to herself, You can do this. Unbeknownst to her, Elon was watching the simulation playback from his office, a faint smile on his face. She's proving herself, he murmured. More than I expected. The day of the Falcon 9 launch arrived. The air at SpaceX was charged with both excitement and tension. Maya stepped into the bustling control center, her heart racing. Engineers filled every station, their eyes fixed on monitors displaying streams of data. The massive digital countdown clock on the wall read, 6 hours and counting. Maya's team gathered in their designated area, each person reviewing their systems one final time. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. If anything went wrong, her team's swift decisions could determine the outcome of the launch. Elon entered the room, his calm demeanor cutting through the tension. Good morning, everyone, he said, addressing the room. This launch isn't just about getting a rocket into orbit, it's about pushing boundaries. And remember, every person here is part of that mission. Trust in the work you've done. We're ready for this. His words were brief, but they carried immense weight. Maya found herself standing a little taller. At 4 hours, Maya's team ran their final diagnostics. Priya called out first, her voice steady but urgent. The propulsion system is stable. No anomalies detected. Telemetry feeds are clean, Sam added. Carlos nodded. Data streams are synchronized. All clear. Victor hesitated, his brows furrowed. Wait, he said, staring at his screen. I'm seeing a slight voltage fluctuation in the onboard navigation system. Maya's heart skipped a beat. How slight? Within acceptable limits, Victor replied, but it's right on the edge. The room fell silent as everyone stared at the readings. Maya leaned over Victor's station, analyzing the data. If this fluctuation increases during launch, it could throw off the rocket's trajectory, she said, her voice calm but firm. Victor sighed. We're out of time to replace the component. It's a gamble. Maya thought quickly. Let's reroute power from non-critical systems to stabilize the voltage. It's a temporary fix, but it should hold through liftoff. Victor raised an eyebrow. You're sure about this? No, Maya admitted, but it's the best option we have right now. With Victor's reluctant nod, the team implemented the fix. As the readings stabilized, Maya felt a rush of relief, but the real test was still ahead. At 2 hours, Maya left the control center briefly to clear her mind. Outside, the Falcon 9 stood tall against the sky, its sleek frame gleaming in the sunlight. She watched as ground crews made their final preparations. Beautiful, isn't it? A voice said behind her. She turned to see Elon, his hands in his pockets, gazing at the rocket. It really is, Maya replied, her voice filled with awe. You did good today, Elon said, glancing at her. The navigation fix, it was the right call? Maya looked at him in surprise. You were watching? I watch everything, he said with a small smile. But don't let that get to your head. The real challenge is staying steady when things get chaotic. Trust yourself and your team. You've got this. His words were simple, but they grounded her. As they walked back inside, Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. The countdown reached 10 minutes, and the room grew silent. Everyone was at their stations, eyes glued to their screens. 2 minutes, the launch director announced. All systems go. Maya's heart pounded as the final seconds ticked away. 10, 9, 8. The roar of the engines filled the air as the Falcon 9 ignited, its flames lighting up the sky. Lift off, the director said, his voice steady. The rocket ascended, a plume of smoke trailing behind it. The room erupted in cheers, but Maya's focus remained on her monitor. Every second of the launch was critical, and she couldn't afford to lose concentration. Stage separation confirmed, Sam called out. Telemetry is stable, Carlos added. Victor's voice cut in, voltage levels holding steady. Maya exhaled, her grip on the console relaxing slightly. So far, everything was going according to plan. As the rocket approached orbit, an alert flashed on Maya's screen. Her stomach dropped. Pressure anomaly in the second stage tank, Priya said, her voice sharp. Maya's mind raced. Victor, confirm the readings. Sam, cross-check telemetry for any additional anomalies. Victor scanned his monitor. Confirmed, pressure is dropping. It's a leak. Maya forced herself to stay calm. Priya, can we compensate by adjusting the valve flow? It's risky, Priya said, but it might work. Do it, Maya ordered. The room held its breath as Priya made the adjustments. The pressure readings stabilized, and a collective sigh of relief swept through the control center. Orbit achieved, the launch director announced. Mission success. Cheers erupted again, louder this time. Maya sank back in her chair, her adrenaline finally subsiding. After the launch, Elon approached Maya and her team. That was excellent work, he said. The pressure adjustment was a bold move, but it paid off. Well done. Maya smiled, her exhaustion giving way to pride. Thank you, she said. Elon nodded. Get some rest. You've earned it. As Maya left the control center, she felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. This wasn't just a win for SpaceX. It was a win for her journey, her resilience, and her belief in herself. That night, in her notebook, she wrote, Day 7. Success isn't about perfection. It's about staying steady, solving problems, and trusting the people around you. Today, we reached the stars. The success of the Falcon 9 launch reverberated throughout SpaceX. In the days that followed, Maya received an outpouring of praise. Emails from colleagues, text messages from old friends, and even a call from Elon himself congratulated her for handling the pressure and leading her team through a crucial mission. But while the recognition was gratifying, Maya knew the real work had just begun. She had proven herself in the heat of the moment, but there was always more to do. The stakes were higher now, and she had to maintain that level of excellence. Maya's newfound reputation didn't go unnoticed by others at SpaceX. The next morning, as she entered the control center, she found herself face-to-face with Jonathan, the lead engineer she had never quite gotten along with. Maya, great job on the launch, he said, his tone measured. But we have a lot more work ahead of us. The next mission won't be as easy. Let's make sure you're ready for that. His words weren't exactly a compliment, but Maya didn't let them faze her. I'm always ready, Jonathan. Just tell me where to focus, and I'll make sure it gets done. He nodded, though his eyes held an unspoken challenge. Maya knew Jonathan had his doubts about her, but she wasn't about to let him, or anyone, undermine the progress she had made. Later that afternoon, she was summoned to a meeting with Elon. The tension in her chest flared up again. What could he possibly want now? As she walked into Elon's office, she found him sitting behind his desk, staring intently at a monitor. His focus shifted to her as she entered. Maya, he said, his voice casual. Good work the other day. You've got a knack for staying calm under pressure. Thank you, Elon, Maya replied, standing at attention. Elon gestured for her to take a seat. I've been thinking about the upcoming Mars project. We've made a lot of progress with Falcon 9, but now we need to start planning for the next frontier. I want you to be a key part of that team. Maya's pulse quickened. The Mars project? This was a monumental leap forward, both for SpaceX and her career. She had dreamed of working on interplanetary missions since she was a child, and now it was becoming a reality. That's incredible, Elon. I'm honored. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. It's going to be a long road. We need the best minds on this, and I think you're one of them. But it's not just about the technical side of things. You'll have to handle more than just the hardware. The psychological and logistical challenges are enormous. I'll need you to think beyond the mission and into the long-term implications. Maya nodded. The weight of his words was not lost on her. Mars wasn't just a destination. It was a test of human endurance, of our very capacity to survive on another planet. She wasn't just stepping up to lead a team. She was about to play a pivotal role in one of humanity's greatest achievements. Elon smiled. I knew you'd rise to the occasion. Let's make this happen. The days that followed were a whirlwind of planning meetings, technical briefings, and brainstorming sessions. Maya was thrust into the heart of the Mars project, collaborating with scientists, engineers, and psychologists to develop a comprehensive strategy for a successful mission. One of the most challenging aspects was the isolation factor. As humans prepared to make the journey to Mars, The team needed to address the psychological toll of prolonged space travel. Maya found herself working closely with Dr. Aisha Patel, a renowned psychologist specializing in space missions. "I've seen how the human mind reacts to isolation," Dr. Patel explained during one of their meetings. "It's not just about keeping people busy. It's about creating an environment that fosters connection, even when they're millions of miles away from Earth." Maya listened carefully, taking notes. How do we simulate that? How can we prepare the crew for this kind of isolation? Dr. Patel smiled. It's not something you can entirely prepare for, but by fostering a sense of camaraderie, creating virtual connections with loved ones back home, and ensuring a supportive environment on board, we can help them cope. Maya felt the enormity of the task ahead. Mars wasn't just a technological challenge, it was a human one. And if the crew couldn't handle the psychological pressure, the mission would fail long before they even set foot on the red planet. Amid the whirlwind of work, Maya found herself struggling to balance her personal life with the demands of the Mars project. Late nights at the office were becoming the norm, and she was rarely home. Her friends had started to notice. One evening, after another long day at SpaceX, Maya returned to her apartment to find a text message from her best friend, Jessica. "Maya, we need to talk. I haven't heard from you in weeks. Are you okay?" Maya sighed, her fingers hovering over the phone screen. She wanted to explain everything, but part of her feared that if she let herself get too close to anyone, she would lose focus on the mission. Still, Jessica deserved better than just a brief text message. Maya typed a response. "I'm sorry, Jess. I've been so caught up in work. I'll call you tomorrow. Promise." As she hit send, Maya realized that she couldn't keep going like this. The mission, the work, the team, they were all important. But so were the people she cared about. The next day, Elon called a meeting with the entire Mars project team. As Maya walked into the conference room, she saw the familiar faces of the engineers, scientists, and psychologists she had been working with. But there was something different in the air today, a palpable sense of urgency. "Team," Elon began, "we're facing a crucial milestone. The design phase for the Mars mission is nearly complete, but there's a lot more to do before we launch. I need all of you focused. This isn't just another project. This is humanity's next giant leap." Maya felt the weight of his words settle over her, as if she had just crossed the threshold of something far greater than herself. "Let's get to work," Elon finished, his voice resolute. As the meeting began, Maya made a silent promise to herself. She would give everything she had to this mission, but she wouldn't forget who she was, who she cared about, and what truly mattered. Her journey to Mars had only just begun. The next few weeks were a blur of late nights and endless meetings. The Mars mission's complexity was overwhelming, and every day brought new challenges. Maya threw herself into her work with a fierce determination, pushing herself and her team to new limits. However, the toll was beginning to show. Every morning felt like a battle to get out of bed. By the time she reached the office, her energy was already drained. The pressure was relentless. Elon's expectations, her own ambition, and the looming deadlines for the Mars project were all weighing on her. Despite her best efforts to keep up appearances, Maya found herself feeling detached. She no longer felt the thrill of the work she was doing. It had become a constant grind. The excitement of the Falcon 9 launch, the praise, the sense of achievement, it all felt distant now. It was around this time that Maya noticed the first signs of burnout. Her concentration began to slip. Meetings that once seemed like an opportunity to contribute now felt like a blur of voices she couldn't quite keep track of. She found herself spacing out during key discussions, mentally exhausted even before the day began. One evening, after another exhausting day of planning, Maya walked to her car, her mind numb from the day's stress. She had intended to call Jessica, but her phone lay forgotten in her pocket. As she started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, her mind wandered back to the conversations with Dr. Aisha Patel about isolation. Maya had always been so focused on leading the team and handling the technical aspects of the mission, but the emotional toll, both on her team and herself, was becoming undeniable. She had barely driven a mile when she realized she couldn't keep going like this. Her mind felt foggy, her body heavy with fatigue, and her once clear vision of the Mars mission seemed to blur. Pulling over to the side of the road, Maya took a deep breath. The truth hit her hard. She was cracking. She needed a break, a chance to reset. But that would mean stepping away from the mission, from everything she had been working for. Could she afford to do that? The following morning, Maya arrived at SpaceX, determined to push through another day. She walked into the control center to find Jonathan waiting at her station, a stack of reports in his hands. "You okay?" he asked, his eyes narrowing as he looked at her. "You don't look so great." Maya managed a weak smile. "I'm fine, Jonathan. Just tired, that's all." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "Tired isn't the same as fine, Maya. You're running on empty. We all are." She shook her head. "I've got it under control. Let's just get this mission done." Jonathan set the reports down on her desk. "I'm not saying you don't have control, but you're pushing yourself too hard. We all are. You need to talk to someone, Elon, maybe. Tell him what's going on. No one's going to think less of you for it." Maya stared at him, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "I can't afford to show weakness. Not now. Not when everyone is counting on me." Jonathan looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, in a quiet voice, he said, "Maya, leadership isn't about carrying everything alone. It's about knowing when to ask for help." Her breath caught in her throat. He was right, but admitting it felt like admitting defeat. As the day wore on, Maya found herself grappling with Jonathan's words. She had always prided herself on being strong, on handling everything that came her way. But perhaps, for the first time, she realized that strength wasn't just about pushing through. It was also about acknowledging when you needed support. That afternoon, she decided to take a step she had been avoiding. She called Jessica. "Hey," Maya said, her voice softer than usual. "I'm sorry I've been distant. I think I'm losing myself in all this work. Can we talk?" The conversation that followed was surprisingly cathartic. Jessica listened patiently as Maya poured out her feelings of exhaustion, the constant pressure, and the fear of letting anyone down. By the end of the call, Maya felt a weight lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel vulnerable, to admit that she was struggling. But the real turning point came when Jessica said something that Maya hadn't expected. "You don't have to do this alone, Maya," Jessica said. "You've got people who care about you. You don't have to be perfect. Just be yourself." Maya sat quietly for a moment, processing the words. It was the first time someone had given her permission to let go of the constant drive for perfection. For the first time, she felt like maybe she could take a step back, breathe, and recalibrate. The next morning, Maya called Elon. She knew the conversation would be difficult, but it was one that had to happen. "Elon," she began, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "I need to talk to you about something. I've been pushing myself too hard, and I'm not sure I'm in the right headspace to continue at this pace. The Mars mission it's a lot, and I need to make sure I'm in the best position to lead. I need a break." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Maya could feel her heart racing. Would he think she was weak? Would he fire her? Finally, Elon spoke. "Maya, I appreciate your honesty. You're doing some of the most important work of your career, and I don't want you to burn out. You're right. You need to be at your best for this. Take the time you need. We'll manage." Maya exhaled in relief. She hadn't expected such understanding. "You're one of the best leaders I've got on this project, Maya," Elon continued. "But even the best need time to recharge. Don't worry about the mission. We'll be here when you're ready." Maya took the next few days to step back from the relentless pressure of the Mars project. She spent time with friends, reconnected with her family, and found solace in the small, quiet moments that had once seemed so insignificant. The break was exactly what she needed. Her mind cleared, her body healed, and her passion for the mission was reignited. She realized that in order to achieve greatness, she didn't have to sacrifice herself. As she walked back into the control center a week later, Maya felt stronger, more centered, and ready to face the challenges ahead. She had learned that even the most ambitious goals had to be balanced with self-care and emotional strength. With a renewed sense of purpose, Maya was ready to take on whatever came next, for the Mars mission, for SpaceX, and for herself. Maya's brief hiatus from the Mars mission had given her the mental reset she so desperately needed, but as soon as she returned to SpaceX, the pressure resumed. The project was in full swing, and the demand seemed even greater than before. While Maya had regained some clarity, there was still a lingering sense of doubt. Was she truly capable of handling the immense responsibilities on her shoulders? The weight of leading humanity's next giant leap into space was heavy, and it seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. Maya had learned the hard way that leadership was about more than just technical expertise. It was about managing people, emotions, and expectations. The team had grown increasingly tense. Deadlines were looming, and some of her colleagues, like Jonathan, were clearly pushing themselves to the limit. Jonathan was never far from her side, especially when things got tough. Though their relationship had always been a bit strained, Maya couldn't deny that Jonathan's practical, no-nonsense approach had its value in times of crisis. Still, his constant presence was starting to wear on her. She could feel his eyes on her more than ever, as if waiting for her to crack. Maya couldn't help but wonder if he thought she was out of her depth. After all, she had never led a project this ambitious, this monumental. The Mars mission was unprecedented in every sense. One afternoon, as Maya reviewed the latest progress reports in her office, the door opened. She looked up, surprised to see Elon standing in the doorway. His presence always commanded attention, but today, there was something different about him. He looked almost concerned. "Maya," he said, his voice softer than usual, "I need a word." She stood up immediately, wondering if something was wrong. "Of course, Elon. What's going on?" Elon entered the room and sat down across from her. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I've been getting some feedback from the team. There's growing concern about the pace of the project." Maya's heart sank. She had suspected this was coming. She had felt the tension rising in the air for weeks. "What kind of concern?" she asked, keeping her voice steady despite the unease creeping in. Elon leaned forward, his tone firm. "There's been talk about the timeline, about the feasibility of certain aspects of the mission. Some of the team are questioning whether we're biting off more than we can chew." Maya's stomach tightened. She knew that the Mars project was ambitious, but hearing it from Elon himself felt like a blow. "What are you suggesting?" she asked, forcing herself to keep calm. Elon paused, then gave her a sharp look. "What I'm suggesting is that we might need to reassess. Perhaps some of our milestones are unrealistic. You're leading a very talented team, but you're also pushing them to the brink. I need you to think about the bigger picture." Maya's mind raced. This wasn't just about the mission anymore. This was about her leadership, her ability to handle the immense pressure and guide the team through the unknown. "I understand," she said quietly. "I'll make sure the team knows we need to be more strategic about how we move forward." Elon nodded, but didn't seem fully convinced. "Maya, this mission is too important. Don't let your drive blind you to what's really needed." As he left the room, Maya sat there, reeling from the conversation. Her worst fear was coming true. She was losing control of the mission. She couldn't afford to make mistakes. Not now. Not when everything was at stake. The next few days were a blur of meetings, updates, and strategic reassessments. Maya had to face a truth she hadn't fully considered. The Mars project was never going to go as planned. There would be setbacks, delays, and challenges that couldn't be foreseen. She had to prepare herself for that. She knew that if she was going to maintain the team's morale, she needed to lead with transparency. If she was struggling, she needed to be open about it. The team had to know that she wasn't just a figurehead, but someone who understood the pressure they were under. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling meeting with the engineers and mission planners, Maya called for a team huddle. Everyone gathered around, and she noticed the familiar faces, some hopeful, others weary, all looking for direction. "I need to be upfront with all of you," Maya began, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "This mission is going to be harder than any of us expected. We've encountered setbacks, and we'll encounter more. But that doesn't mean we give up. It means we adapt." Jonathan, who had been standing near the back of the group, gave her a nod of approval. "We're all in this together," Maya continued. "And if we're going to make it, we need to work as one cohesive unit. We'll face difficulties, but we'll face them together. No one is alone in this. Not me. Not you." There was a brief silence, and then someone from the back spoke up. "What happens if we fail? If we can't get to Mars on time?" Maya looked at the speaker, a young engineer named Laura who had been with the project from the beginning. The fear in her eyes was undeniable. It was a fear that Maya shared, but she refused to give in to it. "If we fail," Maya said, her voice strong, "we'll learn from it. But we won't quit. This mission is too important to back down from. We will push forward, one step at a time, until we succeed." The room was quiet for a moment, and then a murmur of agreement rippled through the group. Maya felt a surge of pride. She had managed to inspire hope when it had seemed in short supply. She had reaffirmed her place as their leader, not through perfection, but through honesty and resolve. That evening, after the team meeting, Maya received an unexpected call. It was from her mother. "Maya, I'm glad I caught you." Her mother's voice came through the line. "I heard about the project. You're really making waves at SpaceX. But, sweetheart, I need to ask you something." "What's going on, Mom?" Maya asked, her tone concerned. "I'm worried about you," her mother replied, her voice soft. "You've been working nonstop for months. I know how much this means to you, but I also know you. You can't keep going like this." Maya felt a pang of guilt. Her mother had always been her rock, the one person who had always known when she was stretching herself too thin. "I'm fine, Mom," Maya reassured her. "Just a little tired. It's a big project, but it's going to be worth it." "Maya, I know you're strong," her mother said, "but don't forget to take care of yourself. No mission is worth sacrificing your health for." Maya swallowed hard. Her mother's words struck deep. She had been so focused on the mission, on making everything perfect, that she had lost sight of what truly mattered. As she hung up the phone, Maya realized that the balance her mother had spoken of wasn't just about work and rest. It was about finding peace within herself, about reconciling the demands of the Mars project with the needs of her own heart. For the first time in a long while, Maya felt a glimmer of clarity. She knew that she wasn't in this alone, not just because of her team, but because of the people who loved her. The journey ahead would be tough, but she wasn't going to let doubt or fear define it. She would rise to the challenge, but she would also remember who she was along the way. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. Maya had always prided herself on being driven, on pushing through obstacles with a singular focus. She was used to managing complexity, to solving problems that seemed insurmountable. But as the days passed, the weight of the Mars mission, combined with the emotional turbulence of her personal life, was starting to make her question if the price of success was worth it. That night, after another grueling day, Maya sat alone in her office, staring at the holographic simulation of the Mars rover. Her team had been working around the clock to perfect the technology, and while their progress was remarkable, the uncertainty of the mission hung over them like a cloud. She hadn't spoken to Elon about the growing doubts she had about the timeline, nor had she addressed the increasing tension within the team. She ran her fingers through her hair, feeling the exhaustion weigh heavily on her shoulders. The team had come so far, but the finish line still seemed out of reach. Her mind raced with 1,000 what-ifs. What if they couldn't make the mission happen on time? What if the technology failed? What if, despite all their efforts, the Mars mission was doomed to be a failure? Just as the weight of the moment seemed too much to bear, Maya's phone buzzed. It was an unexpected message from Jessica. "I'm in town for a few days. I think it's time for you to get some fresh air." Maya smiled. Jessica always seemed to know when she was about to crack. She hadn't spoken to her in weeks, buried under the pressure of her work. The thought of a conversation with her old friend, someone who knew her better than anyone, was both a relief and a reminder of how much she had isolated herself. Within an hour, Maya had arranged to meet Jessica at a quiet cafe near the SpaceX headquarters. When she arrived, Jessica was already there, sitting at a corner table with a warm cup of coffee. Her face lit up as Maya approached, and for the first time in weeks, Maya felt a sense of calm wash over her. "You look like you need this," Jessica said, motioning to the chair across from her. Maya sat down, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in what felt like forever. "I didn't realize how much I missed you," she admitted, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "I know. You've been running yourself ragged." Jessica's expression softened. "How are you, really?" Maya took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the question. She had spent so long burying her feelings, pushing forward without giving herself permission to be vulnerable. But with Jessica, it was different. "I'm scared, Jess," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm terrified that I'm not enough for this. I'm leading the most important mission in history, and I feel like I'm losing control of it. There's so much pressure, and every day feels like a fight just to keep going." Jessica reached across the table, her hand warm and steady on Maya's. "You don't have to do this alone," she said softly. "You're not supposed to carry the world on your shoulders. You've got people who believe in you. You just need to let them in." Maya's eyes welled up, and she quickly blinked back the tears. "I don't know if I can," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm afraid that if I stop pushing, I'll fail. I'll let everyone down." Jessica gave her a knowing look. "You won't fail, Maya, but if you don't take care of yourself, you'll burn out. This mission isn't just about getting to Mars. It's about doing it together. It's about humanity, and that includes you." Maya sat back, the weight of Jessica's words settling deep in her chest. The emotional fog she had been living in for so long began to lift, replaced by a quiet sense of clarity. She had been so focused on the goal that she had forgotten the most important part of leadership: balance. Strength wasn't about doing everything herself. It was about knowing when to ask for help, when to step back, and when to trust the team she had built. The next day, Maya called a meeting with the senior leadership team. She knew that things couldn't continue as they were. The pressure on everyone was reaching a boiling point, and it was starting to show in the work. Mistakes were being made, deadlines were slipping, and morale was starting to wane. It was time to recalibrate. When the team gathered in the conference room, Maya stood at the front, her presence commanding attention. She could feel their eyes on her, expectant, waiting for direction. But instead of diving into technical details or pointing fingers, she spoke from the heart. "We've been working nonstop for months, and I know that every single one of you is giving your best. But we need to admit something. This mission, as important as it is, can't come at the cost of our well-being. We've set some ambitious goals, and while I believe in all of you, we need to reassess our timeline. We can't keep pushing at this pace without risking burnout." There was a long pause as the team processed her words. Jonathan, who had been tense throughout the meeting, finally spoke up. "Are you saying we need to delay the mission?" Maya nodded. "Yes, I think we do. Not indefinitely, but we need to be realistic about what we can accomplish in the short term. We'll still get to Mars, but we need to do it in a way that's sustainable. We can't afford to sacrifice our health, our relationships, or our sanity in the process." The room fell silent again, but this time it was different. There was no resistance, no argument. Maya could see the relief in their eyes. Everyone had been holding their breath, waiting for someone to say what they were all thinking. "We've made incredible progress," Maya continued, her voice steady. "But we need to adjust our priorities. We can't afford to lose sight of why we're doing this. It's not just about reaching Mars. It's about making sure we do it the right way together." The room filled with murmurs of agreement, and for the first time in weeks, Maya felt a sense of unity, of collective purpose. The weight she had been carrying seemed to lighten, not because the challenges ahead had disappeared, but because she had finally allowed herself to share that burden. In the following days, Maya worked closely with the team to adjust the mission's timeline, addressing the concerns and needs of each department. The changes weren't easy, and some deadlines were inevitably pushed back, but Maya knew that it was the right decision. She wasn't just leading the Mars mission. She was leading a team of people, and they all needed to be in the best possible shape, mentally and physically, to make history. As she sat at her desk that afternoon, reflecting on the decisions she had made, Maya felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The mission was still on track, but the difference now was that she was no longer carrying it alone. She had let her team in, and in doing so, had rediscovered what true leadership meant. And as the sun set over the SpaceX campus, Maya finally allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, she could succeed not by working harder, but by working smarter, by recognizing the value in balance, in connection, and in the collective strength of the people who shared her vision. Though the road to Mars was still fraught with challenges, Maya no longer felt like she was walking it alone. She had rediscovered her own strength and, in the process, had strengthened the team around her. The path ahead was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: together, they would reach it. And that made all the difference. The morning sun spilled through the blinds of Maya's office, casting long shadows over the paperwork that cluttered her desk. The mission was on track again. The recalibrated timeline had given the team the breathing room they needed, and for the first time in weeks, Maya felt a sense of accomplishment rather than exhaustion. It wasn't perfect, but it was sustainable. As she ran her fingers over the plans for the Mars mission, her thoughts drifted to Elon. It had been several days since their last meeting, and she hadn't received any word from him regarding the adjustments they had made. Given his relentless drive and perfectionist tendencies, she knew that he would likely have thoughts about the changes. While Maya felt confident in her decision to adjust the timeline, she knew that confronting Elon about it would not be easy. Taking a deep breath, Maya picked up the phone and dialed his number. The line rang twice before he picked up. "Maya?" Elon's voice came through, brisk and direct, as usual. "What's the status?" "I wanted to update you on the mission," Maya began. "We've made some adjustments to the timeline to allow the team to work at a sustainable pace. I think this will help us maintain our productivity without risking burnout. It's important that we get this right, and rushing it would only lead to mistakes." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Maya could almost feel the weight of Elon's thoughts as he processed what she was saying. She knew that he had a vision of reaching Mars as quickly as possible, but she also knew that without the well-being of the team, none of their ambitions would matter. "Elon," she continued, "I believe this is the right approach for the long-term success of the mission. We need to focus on the people as much as the technology. If we want to make history, we have to do it together, not in isolation." A long sigh emanated from the other side of the phone. "Maya, you know how much I want this to succeed. But the timeline is everything. I don't know if we can afford these delays." "I understand, but sometimes progress requires taking a step back to move forward," Maya replied, her voice calm but firm. "I'm not suggesting we delay indefinitely, just that we give ourselves the time to refine and improve. We can't rush something this important. The risks are too great." Another silence hung in the air, and Maya's heart rate quickened. Would he listen to reason, or would he push back as he always did? Finally, Elon spoke. "I trust you, Maya. Just make sure we don't lose momentum. We're in this for the long haul, and we need to keep our eyes on the prize." The relief in Maya's chest was almost immediate. Though Elon was known for his unwavering intensity, she could sense the respect he had for her vision. He may not have fully embraced the change, but he trusted her judgment. That was a small victory. "I won't let you down," Maya said, her voice steady. "We'll keep the momentum, but we'll do it the right way. Together." The days that followed were a blur of meetings, progress reports, and late nights spent refining the technology for the Mars mission. Maya spent more time with her team, listening to their concerns and offering her support. The adjustments to the timeline gave them the flexibility they needed, and as a result, morale began to improve. But as the team moved forward, there was a subtle shift that Maya couldn't ignore. There was a new energy in the air, a sense of camaraderie that hadn't been there before. Maya realized that the team was no longer just working toward the mission. They were working for each other. And that, she knew, was the key to success. One evening, as Maya stood in the control room, watching the latest simulation of the Mars rover's landing sequence, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Elon. "I'm coming over tomorrow. I want to see the progress for myself." Maya stared at the message for a moment, her stomach tightening. While the mission was progressing, she knew that Elon's expectations were incredibly high, and he wouldn't hesitate to challenge her decisions if he felt they were falling short. Taking a deep breath, Maya quickly composed a response. "Looking forward to it. I'll have the team ready to walk you through the updates." The following day, Elon arrived at SpaceX headquarters in the early afternoon. Maya had prepared herself for this moment. She had a briefing lined up, and the team was ready to showcase their work. But despite her best efforts, there was a nervous energy in her bones as she led Elon through the facility. Elon was uncharacteristically quiet as they walked through the various labs and simulations. He inspected the latest rover prototype, his sharp eyes scanning every detail, his mind clearly working a mile a minute. Maya could sense his intense scrutiny, but she had learned to take it in stride. When they reached the central control room, Elon stopped in front of the large display screen that showed the rover's simulated landing sequence. He stood there for a long moment, watching as the rover descended toward the Martian surface, its wheels touching down gently as the simulation concluded successfully. "Impressive," Elon muttered, his eyes never leaving the screen. "But how confident are you that this will work in real conditions?" Maya's heart skipped a beat, but she remained composed. "We've conducted extensive testing, and we've adjusted the sequence based on the most recent data. I'm confident that we're on the right track. We're refining every aspect of the technology to ensure the best possible outcome." Elon turned to her, his gaze sharp. "I know you're putting in the work, Maya, but I need to know that this team can keep pushing forward. This mission, this dream, is bigger than any of us. We can't afford to lose momentum." Maya nodded, understanding the weight of his words. She knew the stakes. "We're in this together, Elon. Every member of this team is fully committed, and I won't let you down. We'll get there." For a moment, Elon said nothing. He simply looked at her, studying her with a penetrating gaze that made her feel as though he could see through her very soul. Finally, he spoke. "I know you won't," he said quietly. "I see it in you. Keep pushing. But don't forget, Maya, this mission is as much about the people as it is about the technology." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Maya standing in the control room, a newfound sense of resolve building inside her. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but with Elon's words echoing in her mind, she realized that success wasn't just about reaching Mars. It was about reaching it together, and that was a goal worth fighting for. The days after Elon's visit were a whirlwind. Maya had anticipated his scrutiny, but what she hadn't expected was how much his quiet support had fueled her. His words, "This mission is as much about the people as it is about the technology," had struck a chord deep within her. It was a reminder that while the mission to Mars was a monumental achievement, the heart of it was the team that had come together to make it happen. Maya found herself reflecting on her own leadership style. She had always been a driven perfectionist, a problem solver who thrived under pressure. But in the weeks since her conversation with Jessica, she had come to realize that leadership wasn't just about solving problems. It was about empowering others to do the same. The team needed her guidance, yes, but they also needed her trust. With the pressure of the timeline now off their shoulders, Maya noticed a shift within her team. People were more willing to speak up, share ideas, and collaborate. The space that had been created for creativity and critical thinking allowed everyone to feel like they were part of something bigger than themselves. It wasn't just about a Mars landing anymore. It was about a collective mission. Maya sat in her office late one evening, reviewing data reports on the rover's latest simulations. As she scrolled through the results, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a video message from Elon. She clicked on it, eager to hear his thoughts. "Hey, Maya." Elon's face appeared on the screen, his usual intensity softened by what looked like a rare moment of sincerity. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day, about the mission being bigger than just technology. I wanted to take a moment to thank you for keeping the team focused, for reminding us that we're all in this together." Maya paused, feeling a swell of pride at his words. "You're right," Elon continued. "It's not just about the rocket or the rover, or even the destination. It's about the people who make it all happen. So, I want you to know, I trust you. I trust your leadership, and I believe in the team you've built." The video ended with a small smile from Elon, one that seemed more genuine than anything Maya had seen in recent months. She sat back in her chair, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and gratitude. For so long, she had doubted her own abilities. She had questioned whether she was enough to lead such an important mission. But now, with Elon's support, she felt more certain than ever that she was exactly where she needed to be. The next day, Maya gathered her leadership team for a crucial meeting. The updates from the latest round of testing had come in, and while there had been some setbacks, they were all minor. The rover was more than ready for its next phase of testing, and Maya could feel the momentum building. "We've made incredible progress," she began, addressing her team. "We've overcome challenges that seemed insurmountable just a few months ago. But this mission isn't just about overcoming obstacles, it's about achieving the impossible." The room was filled with focused faces, each one reflecting the same determination that Maya had come to expect from the team. They weren't just doing their jobs, They were living out a shared dream. We've adjusted our timeline to ensure that we're working at a sustainable pace, but that doesn't mean we're slowing down. We need to maintain this momentum, Maya continued, her voice steady. I know there are still risks ahead, but we're going to face them together. We're not just building a rover. We're building history. There was a moment of silence as everyone absorbed her words. Then, Jonathan, the lead engineer, spoke up. Maya, I think we're ready to take it to the next level, he said, his voice filled with excitement. The rover's final testing phase is complete. We've identified a few minor tweaks, but we're on track. We're ready to move forward with the Mars mission prep. Maya smiled. That's great news, Jonathan. Let's keep this momentum going. But I want to make sure we're all clear on something. This mission is more than a series of technical steps. It's about pushing humanity forward, together. We're not just sending a rover to Mars. We're paving the way for future generations. Her words resonated in the room, and for the first time in a long time, Maya felt the weight of the mission lift slightly. It wasn't just about getting to Mars. It was about what would come after. As the meeting wrapped up, Maya's thoughts drifted back to Elon's message. She had earned his trust, but more importantly, she had earned her own. This wasn't just a job for her anymore. It was her purpose, and she was ready to see it through to the end. Later that evening, as the team continued to make final adjustments to the rover, Maya stepped outside to clear her head. The stars above the SpaceX campus were bright, a reminder of the boundless possibilities that lay ahead. For a moment, she allowed herself to simply breathe, to let go of the weight she had been carrying for so long. Are you coming back in? Jessica's voice broke through the quiet. Maya turned to see her friend standing a few feet away, a knowing look in her eyes. Yeah, Maya replied, her voice soft but steady. I just needed a moment to take it all in. Jessica smiled and joined her by the railing. I know it's been tough, but you're doing it. You're leading this team to something incredible, and you don't have to do it alone. Maya glanced at her, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Jessica had always been her rock, and now more than ever, Maya needed that support. I've learned that, haven't I? Maya said quietly. I can't do this alone, but together, we're unstoppable. They stood there for a few moments in silence, watching as the stars twinkled above them. Maya knew that the journey ahead was still filled with challenges, but for the first time, she felt ready to face them head-on. As Maya walked back inside, her mind was clear, her heart steady. The road to Mars was still long, but now, she didn't feel like she was walking it alone. She had a team behind her, and with their combined strength, there was nothing they couldn't achieve. With each step, she grew more certain that they were on the right path. The mission wasn't just about Mars anymore. It was about the people who would make it happen, the people who would change the world, and Maya was ready to lead them there. The following weeks passed by in a blur of final checks, press conferences, and long hours spent in the lab, refining the rover's design. Maya had become accustomed to the frenetic pace, but there were moments when she still felt the weight of the mission's enormity bearing down on her. Every decision she made, every update she approved, was a step closer to history. And yet, the stakes kept rising. The mission to Mars was no longer just about technology. It had become a symbol of humanity's resilience, its ambition, and its determination to explore the unknown. But Maya knew that as important as the technology was, the real challenge was the people. The team, her team, their work, their well-being, and their commitment to the mission would ultimately determine whether they succeeded or failed. One afternoon, as Maya sat in her office reviewing the latest testing data, there was a knock at the door. Come in, she called without looking up. It was Jonathan, the lead engineer. He stepped inside, a look of quiet urgency on his face. Maya, he began, closing the door behind him, there's something you need to see. We've encountered an anomaly in the rover's fuel system. It's nothing catastrophic, but if we don't address it now, it could cause problems down the line. Maya's heart sank. The last thing she wanted was another setback, especially with the mission deadline approaching. She set the datapad down and looked at Jonathan with determination. What kind of anomaly? She asked, keeping her voice steady despite the rising tension in her chest. Jonathan pulled up a digital schematic of the rover on the screen behind him. We've identified a potential issue with the engine's thermal regulation. It's not immediately dangerous, but if the rover's fuel system overheats during the landing sequence, it could compromise the entire mission. We need to fix it before we proceed with any more testing. Maya studied the data, her mind racing. A fuel system failure was one of the most critical issues they could face, but at this stage, they didn't have the luxury of time to simply stop and fix everything. They had to keep moving forward. "How much time do we have?" she asked, her voice calm but insistent. Jonathan glanced at the screen, his fingers tapping nervously against the console. "We can make adjustments, but we'll need at least another 2 weeks of testing. Any shorter, and we risk missing a major flaw." Maya felt her pulse quicken. The 2-week delay was manageable, but it meant pushing the timeline even further. It was a difficult decision, and for a moment, Maya's mind flashed to the pressure that Elon had placed on her earlier. He had been adamant about keeping the pace. But this was not just about the timeline. It was about ensuring the safety of the mission and of the team. "Maya, we need your decision," Jonathan said, his voice edged with concern. "Do we proceed with the adjustments, or do we keep pushing forward and hope the anomaly doesn't cause issues?" Maya paused, her thoughts swirling. The weight of the decision felt heavier than any she had faced so far. But she knew what she had to do. "I want the team to focus on the adjustments," she said, her voice firm. "We can't afford to take any chances. This mission is too important." Jonathan nodded, visibly relieved. "Understood. We'll get started right away." As he left the room, Maya felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. The mission was back on track, but the delay would undoubtedly bring more scrutiny. Elon had made it clear that time was of the essence. Still, Maya knew she had made the right choice. That evening, as Maya prepared for a meeting with the rest of her leadership team, her phone buzzed with a message from Elon. She opened it hesitantly. "How are we doing, Maya? Still on track?" Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she considered her response. She had always been upfront with Elon, but now there was an added layer of pressure. She couldn't afford to downplay the situation, but at the same time, she didn't want to cause unnecessary concern. "We've encountered a minor anomaly in the rover's fuel system. We're addressing it now, but it will take about 2 weeks of testing to ensure everything is fully operational." She held her breath before sending the message. Almost immediately, Elon's reply came through. 2 weeks? That's a lot of time. Is it something that will impact the overall mission? Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she read the message. It was clear that Elon wasn't pleased, but he didn't seem ready to blow up either. She typed back quickly. "No, it won't impact the mission, but we need to make sure we don't take any chances. It's a precaution, and it'll ensure the rover is ready for the harsh conditions on Mars." She hit send and stared at the screen, waiting for his response. After a moment, he replied, "I trust your judgment, Maya, but don't let this drag on longer than necessary. We can't afford any more delays." Maya exhaled, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. Elon's trust, though quietly given, meant everything. She could feel the respect in his words. He had always been focused on the end goal, but now, it seemed that he was beginning to understand the importance of taking care of the team, of ensuring that every piece was in place before they moved forward. Maya set the phone down and sat back in her chair, her mind turning over the implications of the delay. 2 weeks. It seemed like an eternity, but in the grand scheme of things, it was a small sacrifice for the safety and success of the mission. The next morning, Maya met with her leadership team, ready to present the updated plan for the rover's testing. There was a palpable tension in the air, but Maya stood tall, her confidence unwavering. "We've encountered a minor issue with the rover's fuel system," she explained, addressing the team. "But we're on top of it. We're taking the necessary precautions to ensure the mission stays on track. We'll need an additional 2 weeks for testing, but after that, we'll be ready to proceed with the next phase." Jonathan and the other engineers nodded in agreement. "We'll make the adjustments and ensure everything is running smoothly," Jonathan confirmed. Maya felt a wave of gratitude toward her team. They weren't just working to meet a deadline. They were working to make history together. As the meeting concluded, Maya stepped out into the hallway, her thoughts on the road ahead. The delay was a challenge, but it was one that she knew they could overcome. The mission was at a crossroads, and she had to be sure that every decision she made from here on out would bring them one step closer to Mars. She looked up at the sky through the glass walls of the building. The stars were out there, waiting, and she was ready to lead her team toward them, no matter the obstacles in their path. With the 2-week testing phase underway, Maya found herself in the midst of a delicate balancing act. The pressure to stay on schedule was ever present, but the need to ensure that the rover was flawless weighed heavily on her mind. Every test, every adjustment was a gamble, one that could either propel them forward or set them back further. Maya spent most of her days reviewing test results, meeting with engineers, and discussing strategy with the rest of the leadership team. As the team worked around the clock to address the fuel system anomaly, she felt a mix of urgency and calmness. The delay was necessary, but it was still a blow to the timeline, and she knew that Elon would be watching closely. Despite the added stress, Maya remained resolute. She had made her decision, and now, all she could do was trust the team and the process. The 2 weeks would pass in a blur, but she was determined to make them count. As the days ticked by, Maya found herself growing closer to her team. The bonds that had formed in the early days of the mission had strengthened, and now, with the challenge of the fuel system issue, there was a shared sense of purpose. They were no longer just a group of engineers and scientists working on a project. They were a family, united by a common goal. One evening, as Maya sat in her office, reviewing the latest test data, there was a knock on the door. "Come in," she called, not looking up. Jonathan entered, holding a tablet in his hand. His face was tense, and for the first time in weeks, Maya saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "Maya," he said, his voice low, "we've hit another snag. The fuel system is functioning as expected, but the rover's heat shields aren't performing as we anticipated. They're too rigid, which could make them vulnerable during the descent. We might need to redesign them." Maya's stomach dropped. The heat shield issue was critical. If they couldn't get it right, the rover would burn up upon re-entry. This was the last thing they needed. "How bad is it?" Maya asked, keeping her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. Jonathan hesitated. "It's not catastrophic, but it will delay testing further. We'll need to redesign the shields and retest them before we can proceed. It could take at least another week." Maya's mind raced. Another setback? They were already on the edge of their timeline, but she knew that she couldn't rush this. If they didn't get the heat shields right, the whole mission could fail. "Do whatever it takes," Maya said finally, her voice firm. "I don't care if it takes another week. We need to fix this." Jonathan nodded, his expression one of determination. "We'll get it done, Maya. I'll inform the team." As Jonathan left the room, Maya leaned back in her chair, feeling the weight of the situation settle over her. She had expected challenges, but this was something else. There was no room for error now. Every detail, every test, every tweak mattered more than ever. And the clock was ticking. The next week passed in a blur. The team worked tirelessly to redesign the heat shields, performing countless simulations and tests to ensure they would withstand the intense friction of re-entry. Maya was in constant communication with Elon, providing updates on the progress and the new timeline. Though he was clearly frustrated by the delays, he never wavered in his support. "You're doing the right thing, Maya," he told her during one of their calls. "The heat shields are a critical part of the mission. We can't afford to compromise on this. Just make sure we're not losing more time than we have to." Maya's resolve only grew stronger. She knew Elon was right, but she also understood that these challenges were testing her in ways she hadn't anticipated. The pressure was suffocating, but she wasn't backing down. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the new heat shields were ready for testing. The team had put everything they had into making sure they were perfect, and Maya was cautiously optimistic. They were so close now, she could almost taste it. The testing began early one morning, and Maya watched with bated breath as the simulations ran. The first test was promising, showing that the shields could handle the temperatures during re-entry. But there was still one final test to perform, the real-world test. They had to see if the shields would hold up under actual conditions, with the rover in a simulated descent environment. The test was scheduled for that afternoon, and Maya could feel the tension in the air as the team gathered in the control room. Jonathan and the other engineers were at their stations, monitoring the data, while Maya stood at the front, watching the screens. She could see the rover in the simulation, poised for its descent. Initiating test now, Jonathan's voice crackled through the speakers. Maya's heart pounded as the rover was sent into the simulated atmosphere. The temperature readings began to climb, and everyone in the room held their breath. The minutes stretched on like hours. Maya couldn't look away from the screens. She was too invested now, too close to the goal. Then, the data came in. The shields were holding up. The rover was descending at a safe rate. Maya let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The team erupted into applause, and Maya couldn't help but smile. It wasn't perfect, but it was close enough. They had passed the final test. Jonathan turned to Maya, his eyes bright with excitement. "It's a success, Maya. We did it." Maya nodded, her mind racing. They had done it. They had overcome the obstacles, the delays, the doubts. The mission was back on track. For the first time in weeks, Maya allowed herself to relax. She knew there was still much work to be done, but they had reached a critical milestone. Mars was within reach, and she was one step closer to making the impossible possible. Later that evening, as the team celebrated their success, Maya found herself alone for a moment. She stood by the window, looking out at the vast expanse of the SpaceX campus. The stars were clearer than she had ever seen them, and for a moment, she felt as though she could almost touch them. It had been a long road, filled with unexpected twists and turns, but Maya knew one thing for certain. They were ready. The mission was no longer just a dream. It was a reality, and they were about to make history. With a deep breath, she turned away from the window, ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. The final countdown had begun. The days following the successful heat shield test were a whirlwind of activity. Maya barely had time to savor the victory before the next set of challenges began to unfold. The rover was ready, the adjustments had been made, and the testing had gone smoothly, but now it was time for the final preparations. The countdown clock was ticking louder with every passing minute. The pressure had never been greater. Maya stood in the control center, her eyes scanning the massive screens that displayed a series of live simulations. She couldn't shake the sense of anticipation that gripped her. The mission, which had once seemed like an impossible dream, was now within reach. But there was no time for complacency. There were still hundreds of small details to address before the rover could launch. Every single one had to be perfect. It was late in the afternoon when Elon called her. Maya felt a slight tension in her chest as she answered the call. She had been in constant communication with him, but this call felt different. There was something in his voice that told her this was going to be more than just an update. "Maya," Elon said, his voice steady but intense. "How are we doing? We're almost there, but I want to make sure everything is as solid as it can be." Maya glanced at the control room around her, where the team was immersed in their work, oblivious to the conversation taking place. "We're ready, Elon," she replied, her voice steady. "The rover's systems are all functioning. We've addressed the fuel issue, the heat shields, and all other critical components. The team is working through the final checks now. We're on track to launch in 2 weeks." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, and then Elon spoke again. "I know we've been pushing this to the limit, but don't rush anything. If there's anything that doesn't feel right, I need you to speak up." Maya felt a slight tension release from her shoulders. Elon's words, though firm, were filled with a sense of trust. She had always respected his drive, his vision, but in that moment, she realized just how much he relied on her judgment. "I understand, Elon," Maya said. "We've made sure every part of the mission is sound. The team's been incredible. I'll keep you updated on any developments." "Good. But remember, this is more than just a launch. This is humanity's next giant leap. We're making history." Maya looked out over the control room again, her thoughts on the enormity of what they were about to undertake. She had always known that this mission was bigger than just science. It was about the future, about inspiring the next generation of explorers. But hearing Elon say those words again made her realize just how much was riding on their success. "I won't let you down," she said quietly before ending the call. As the screen went dark, Maya turned back toward the team. They were busy coordinating the last of the rover's power systems. It was a tense time, and even though things were going smoothly, Maya could sense the anxiety that lingered in the air. Every day felt like a race against time. Every decision, every test, could make or break their mission. The following day, Maya and the team gathered in the launch control room for a final walkthrough. The countdown to launch was now less than 10 days away, and the mood was a mix of excitement and exhaustion. Everyone had put in their best effort, working tirelessly through the night shifts and pushing their limits to make sure that every test and simulation was perfect. Maya stood at the front of the room, facing the team. She could see the determination in their eyes, but there was also a weariness that had begun to settle in. The past few months had been grueling, and though they were all committed to the mission, Maya could sense that they were all hoping for a break. "We're close," she began, her voice clear and steady. "We've come a long way, and we're almost there. The rover is in perfect shape, the systems are all go, and the launch window is just around the corner. But remember, there's still work to be done. We can't afford to let up now. Not when we're this close." She paused, letting the gravity of her words sink in. "This is the moment we've all been waiting for. And together, we're going to make it happen." The team nodded, their exhaustion momentarily replaced by renewed focus. Maya could feel the sense of unity in the room, the unspoken bond that had grown stronger with every obstacle they had faced. They were no longer just colleagues, they were a family, and they had one final goal: to get to Mars. The days leading up to the launch were a blur. Maya barely slept, spending most of her time overseeing the final adjustments and attending meetings with Elon. There were still technical challenges to address, and though the rover was ready for launch, she knew they couldn't afford to cut corners at this stage. Every test, every step had to be executed perfectly. The night before the launch, Maya found herself standing alone in the mission control room, staring at the massive screen that displayed a live feed of the launch pad. The rover, now secured and ready to be deployed, stood tall, waiting for its moment to take flight. A sense of awe washed over Maya. This was it. This was the culmination of years of hard work, countless hours of testing, and the dedication of an entire team. The next few moments would change everything. Her thoughts drifted back to the beginning of the mission, to the early days when everything seemed like a distant dream. The obstacles, the setbacks, the doubts, they had all led them to this point. They had proven everyone wrong. They had turned the impossible into reality. Ready to make history? A voice broke through her thoughts. Maya turned to find Jonathan standing at the door, a grin on his face despite the exhaustion in his eyes. She smiled back, nodding. "Ready," she replied, her voice steady. "Let's do this." Together, they watched the countdown clock, which ticked down relentlessly. 60 minutes, 30 minutes, 10 minutes. The launch was almost here, and with it, a new era of space exploration. The final countdown began, and the team gathered around the control center. Their hands were steady, their focus unwavering. The whole world was about to witness the birth of a new chapter in humanity's exploration of the cosmos. And Maya was ready, ready to lead them into the unknown, ready to take that first step into history. "Let's do this," she whispered to herself as the clock hit 0. The engines roared to life, and the rover was on its way. As the rocket carrying the rover began its ascent, the control room was filled with a mixture of awe, tension, and anticipation. Maya stood at the front, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the screens closely. The countdown had reached its 0 hour, and now the mission was truly in motion. The journey to Mars was underway, and there was no turning back. The rocket shot into the sky, a bright streak of fire against the darkening horizon. Maya felt the familiar pang of excitement in her chest, the same one she had felt in her early days at NASA when she first dreamed of reaching Mars. But this was different. This time, she wasn't just a spectator. She was part of something far greater. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced down to see a message from Elon. "Great work, Maya. We're all watching. Let's make history." A quiet smile spread across her face. It was simple, but it was all the affirmation she needed. Elon had always been a man of few words, but those few words carried weight. She wasn't alone in this mission. Everyone, from the engineers to the leadership team, was with her every step of the way. "Status?" Maya asked, turning toward Jonathan, who was sitting at one of the control stations. "We're good," Jonathan replied, his fingers flying over the keys. "Everything looks stable." The rocket is on course for its trajectory, and the rover systems are performing within expected parameters. Maya nodded, her mind already shifting to the next phase. The rocket would travel for several months before entering Mars orbit, and during that time, they had to ensure the rover would remain operational. She knew the real challenges lay ahead once they reached the planet. The first few hours after launch were uneventful, but as time passed, Maya's nerves began to settle into a rhythm. The team was running simulations, checking systems, and doing everything they could to monitor the rover's progress. It was a delicate balance, constant vigilance without overwhelming the systems that were already in place. But as the day wore on, Maya began to notice a shift. The usual tension in the air had begun to feel like a low hum of excitement. The team's confidence was growing. Every status update was a confirmation that things were proceeding as planned. By evening, the initial phase of the mission was complete, and they had entered the first stretch of deep space travel. The rover, now safely in orbit, was positioned for its extended journey toward Mars. As the team filed out of the control room to grab a quick bite to eat, Maya lingered behind. She couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. She had spent months preparing for this moment, but now, with the rover in the sky, it felt almost surreal. The stakes were higher than ever, but the weight of the mission had never felt lighter. Maya walked over to the observation window, staring out at the vast expanse of the night sky. It was a quiet moment, one that felt almost sacred. Here she was, standing on the precipice of something monumental, and all she could think about was how far they had come. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call. Maya, Elon's voice crackled over the line. How's everything looking? She smiled. We're good. The launch was perfect. The systems are stable, and the rover is well on its way. We're in this for the long haul now. Elon let out a small chuckle. That's what I like to hear. You've done an incredible job. Now, we wait. Maya paused, letting the silence settle between them for a moment. It's not over yet, Elon. The real work begins now. I know, but there's no one better to lead this than you. The praise was simple but meaningful. For Maya, it wasn't just about the mission. It was about the team, the relationships she had built, and the trust they had in each other. They were all in this together, every step of the way. After a brief exchange, they ended the call, and Maya took a deep breath. There was still so much left to do, but for the first time, she felt like they could truly make it. They had proven themselves so far, and now they just had to keep going. Days turned into weeks as the rover journeyed through deep space. The team monitored every system, every reading, making sure that everything continued to run smoothly. Though the initial phase had been successful, Maya knew they had to stay vigilant. A single hiccup, even now, could still jeopardize everything. But the rover seemed to be in perfect condition. The solar panels were charging efficiently, the systems were running at optimal levels, and the communications were coming through clear. Maya had seen countless missions before, but nothing like this. This wasn't just about landing on Mars. This was about laying the foundation for future human exploration. The rover's mission was only the beginning. Over the next few months, as the team worked from Earth to monitor the rover's progress, a sense of calm settled over them. They were nearing the final approach to Mars. The excitement was building again, but this time, it was different. The pressure wasn't as intense. Maya had built her team's confidence, and the belief in their success was palpable. One evening, as they approached Mars orbit, Maya received a call from Jonathan. There was a slight hitch in one of the rover's systems, but nothing serious. As always, Maya's response was calm and composed. She trusted her team, and together, they would resolve it. When the problem was fixed and everything returned to normal, Maya took a moment to herself. She stared out the window of the control center, the stars twinkling in the vastness of space. She could feel the weight of what was to come. Soon, the rover would enter Mars' atmosphere, and the landing would begin. Her heart raced as the final steps drew near. The rover's approach would be the ultimate test. Everything they had worked for, all the long hours, the setbacks, the doubts, it all led to this moment. Maya knew they were ready. And so, with the rover nearing Mars, she watched as the control room prepared for the final countdown. They were about to make history. The silence in the control room was almost unbearable. The tension in the air was palpable, like a storm waiting to break. Every single person, from Maya to the engineers, sat at their stations, eyes glued to the screens, fingers hovering over buttons, ready to react at a moment's notice. The rover was nearing Mars' atmosphere. This was it, the most critical part of the mission. The team had been preparing for months. They had run simulations countless times, but nothing could truly prepare them for the uncertainty of a real-time descent onto a foreign planet. Every variable, every slight deviation from the plan, could mean the difference between success and failure. The stakes were higher than ever. Maya took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. This was the moment she had been working toward her entire career. The mission wasn't just about sending a rover to Mars. It was about pushing humanity's boundaries, about taking the next step into the unknown. It was about exploring a world that no human had ever set foot on. And it was all in her hands now. 5 minutes to entry, Jonathan called from the corner, his voice steady but tight with anticipation. Maya's heart skipped a beat. She glanced at the countdown clock, which showed the seconds ticking down relentlessly. It felt as though time was stretching, each moment dragging as they all waited for the rover to make its final descent. "Everyone stay sharp," Maya said, her voice cutting through the tense atmosphere. "This is what we've trained for. Keep your eyes on the screens. We're almost there." As the final moments approached, Maya's mind began to race. The rover was traveling at breakneck speeds as it entered the Martian atmosphere, and soon the heat shield would have to do its job. If it failed, the entire mission would be at risk. The temperature would spike, and the rover would burn up before it even had a chance to land. Maya felt her palms grow sweaty, but she kept her focus. She couldn't afford to let fear or doubt take over. She had led her team through countless challenges before. This was no different. "Atmosphere entry in 30 seconds, came another voice, cutting through her thoughts. The moment had arrived. Maya watched the screen as the rover began to enter Mars' atmosphere. The heat shield began to glow, a faint orange light at first, then brighter as the vehicle cut through the thinning air. The speed was astonishing, and with it came the roar of the friction as the rover descended. But despite the intense heat, the rover remained intact, protected by the meticulously tested heat shield. "Heat shield holding steady," Jonathan reported, his voice more confident now. Maya felt a weight lift off her shoulders. This was one of the most critical tests, and it had passed. But there were still many more obstacles to overcome. As the rover continued its descent, the parachutes deployed. The sound of their deployment echoed through the room. The data was streaming in live, and Maya and her team watched the screen closely. Each moment felt like an eternity as they tracked the rover's trajectory toward the surface. The tension in the room grew as the rover fell further and further. It was getting close now, too close. Maya could feel the eyes of the entire world on them, even though they were isolated in their small, windowless control room. Every single person on Earth who was watching this moment knew just how much was riding on it. "Parachutes fully deployed," Jonathan confirmed. "The rover is slowing down." But even as they celebrated the success of the parachute deployment, there was no time to relax. The rover was now descending toward the Martian surface, and the next phase, the rocket-assisted landing, was about to begin. The team held their breath. For the past several months, they had been working toward this very moment, and now there was nothing left to do but watch. The final descent was a delicate ballet of technology and physics. The rover needed to slow its fall even more, precisely aligning itself with the landing site. The screen flickered for a moment, and Maya's heart nearly stopped. "Do we have confirmation on the landing gear?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. "Almost," came the reply from the technician monitoring the rover's descent. "The thrusters are firing." And then, after what felt like an eternity, the screen flickered again, and the confirmation came through. "Rover has successfully landed." A wave of relief swept over the room. It was quiet at first, the weight of the achievement settling in. Then, one by one, the team erupted into applause. Maya stood motionless for a moment, her gaze fixed on the screen. She wanted to savor the moment. This was the culmination of years of effort, of sacrifice, of sleepless nights. But there was no time to waste. The real work had only just begun. Maya let the applause wash over her. But then, with a deep breath, she turned to Jonathan. "We've made history," she said, her voice soft, but filled with pride. "But now we need to make sure the rover communicates with Earth. Let's get the first data stream." Jonathan nodded and quickly moved to his station. The team had already begun running the initial communications checks. The rover had successfully landed, but that was only the first part of the mission. It still had to send back data, crucial information about the Martian surface, the atmosphere, and the surrounding environment. The minutes ticked by. It felt like a lifetime before the first signal came through. The screen blinked to life with the first transmission from the rover. Data was streaming in, confirming the rover's position and health. Maya couldn't help but smile as she watched the data come in. It was all working. "We've got it," Jonathan said, a grin spreading across his face. "We're getting our first data from Mars." Maya's heart swelled with pride. The rover had not only landed, it had survived the harsh conditions of Mars and was already sending back valuable information. The mission was far from over, but it had already proven itself a success. The room buzzed with excitement as the team continued to monitor the data, but Maya allowed herself a moment to reflect on the magnitude of what they had accomplished. They had sent a rover to Mars. They had landed it safely on the surface, and they had begun the process of unlocking the mysteries of a new world. "Let's get to work," Maya said, her voice steady again, focused on the road ahead. The journey was far from over, but they had made it. The first step had been taken, and humanity's exploration of Mars had begun. As the rover's systems hummed to life, Maya and her team felt a deep sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just the success of the landing, but the realization that they had just completed one of humanity's greatest feats. The rover was now on Mars, and it was beginning to send back data. The data was more than just numbers. It was proof that Mars, once a distant dream, was now a reality within their grasp. For Maya, the success felt surreal. She had spent years imagining this moment, but now that it was here, it almost didn't seem real. The planet she had studied from books and pictures for so long was no longer just an idea. It was tangible. The rover's first images from the Martian surface were being transmitted to Earth, each one offering a new window into the planet's mysterious landscape. "First images are coming through now," Jonathan called out, his voice filled with a quiet excitement. "We've got our first look at Mars." Maya walked over to his station, where the team was eagerly gathering around the monitors. On the screen, a faint but clear image began to form. At first, it was just a blur of red dust, but soon, the landscape took shape. Barren, rocky terrain stretched out as far as the eye could see, with jagged mountains in the distance and the faint curve of the horizon meeting the Martian sky. It was beautiful in its desolation. "Wow," Maya whispered, her breath catching in her throat. The sight was breathtaking, and it made everything they had worked for feel worth it. There it was, Mars. "First image transmission complete," Jonathan said, his voice still a little shaky. "We're good to go. Now we need to calibrate the instruments." Maya nodded, her mind already moving on to the next phase. She knew that the rover had to do more than just send back images. It had to gather data, analyze soil samples, and run tests that would provide critical information about Mars' atmosphere and potential for life. This was just the beginning. The team quickly shifted into action, working with precision as they began calibrating the rover's instruments. The sun had begun to dip below the horizon in the control room, but no one was ready to leave. There was too much at stake. Maya glanced over at the clock. It had been hours since the successful landing, and she knew they had to maintain focus. As the calibration continued, the rover's science payload began to come online, and the first data set began streaming in. "Data's live," Jonathan said, looking over his shoulder. "We've got real-time atmospheric readings. Temperature, wind speed, pressure. It's all here." Maya felt a jolt of excitement. This was exactly what they had been working for. The rover's first successful data collection was invaluable. Each piece of information would lead them closer to understanding Mars and its potential for future human habitation. She leaned over Jonathan's shoulder, reviewing the data as it flashed across the screen. The numbers were promising. The Martian atmosphere was thin, but it had enough of the essential elements to support life, if only in a very limited way. The temperature was colder than anticipated, but it was still within a range that could be manageable with the right technology. And the wind? It was strong, just as predicted, but it was a sign of Mars' dynamic and ever-changing environment. These readings will help us plan the next steps for human exploration, Maya said, more to herself than anyone else. But we still have so much more to learn. As the rover continued to collect and send data, the team worked tirelessly to analyze it. But it was clear that their success on this first day was monumental. Mars had welcomed their rover, and the mission was off to a perfect start. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Maya and her team spent each hour reviewing the rover's data, running simulations, and making sure the rover remained operational. They had to ensure that the rover was performing as expected and that the information being sent back was accurate. Maya's mind was consumed by the data, the soil samples, the atmospheric readings, the temperature shifts, and what it all meant for humanity's future on Mars. The rover had only just begun to scratch the surface of the planet, but each piece of data it sent back was like a new puzzle piece falling into place. But amid all the excitement and pressure of the mission, Maya found herself reflecting more on her journey. The quiet moments, when she would sit in her office late at night, staring at the screens as the rover moved across the Martian surface, made her realize how much this mission meant, not just for her, but for the world. For the first time, Mars felt reachable. It wasn't just a dream. It was a place where people could one day live and work. Elon had been in contact regularly, offering his praise and encouragement. He was pleased with the progress, but Maya knew he was already thinking ahead, considering what came next. The rover was doing its job, but the next mission, manned exploration, was already on the horizon. "We've got a lot of work to do," he told her one evening over the phone. "But you've proven it's possible. You've shown us the way." Maya had no doubt that he believed in her team. But she also knew that the real challenges were just beginning. Mars wasn't going to give up its secrets easily. It was going to take years of work, of perseverance, innovation, and determination to unlock its mysteries. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of triumph. They had made it. They had reached Mars. And in doing so, they had opened up a future of possibilities for all of humanity. "Let's make history," Maya whispered to herself, standing before the screens that displayed the rover's steady movements across the Martian surface. History had already been made, but the next chapter, humanity's journey to Mars, was just beginning. The success of the landing and the data streaming in from the rover had left Maya and her team feeling elated. Every image, every new piece of information brought them closer to understanding the Martian landscape. They were on the verge of something monumental, a turning point in human exploration. Yet, there was a growing sense of unease in the back of Maya's mind. The rover had been functioning flawlessly, but something strange had happened just after the last data packet was received. It had been subtle at first, a faint flicker on the monitoring screens, almost imperceptible. But Maya, ever the perfectionist, had noticed it immediately. A small anomaly in the data stream. It wasn't a technical glitch, she was certain of that. This was something different. She could feel it. There was a signal embedded deep in the transmission. A pulse, a pattern that shouldn't have been there. She had mentioned it to Jonathan, who had shrugged it off initially. "Probably just interference from the Martian atmosphere," he had said. "It happens sometimes, especially with the distance we're dealing with." But the signal had lingered, faint but insistent, like a whisper at the edge of her consciousness. Something about it didn't sit right with her. It wasn't just static. It seemed deliberate. Late one evening, while the rest of the team took a break, Maya stayed behind. She pored over the data alone in the control room, her fingers dancing across the keyboard as she traced the signal back. She adjusted the parameters and reran the analysis, isolating the strange pattern. After what felt like an eternity, the anomaly became clearer. It wasn't random. It was a code. Her heart began to race. Could this be a mistake? Some kind of signal from the rover's systems malfunctioning? Or was there something more to it? Maya didn't have an answer, but she knew she couldn't ignore it. This was a moment that could change everything. If the rover had somehow intercepted a signal from Mars, an alien source, perhaps, it would be the discovery of the century. She needed to show someone. She dialed Jonathan's number. "Hey, Jonathan," she said, her voice urgent. "I need you to come back to the control room. I think I've found something." Jonathan arrived a few minutes later, looking confused but concerned. "What's going on, Maya?" She pointed to the screen, where the strange signal was now pulsing rhythmically, like a heartbeat. "Look at this. I've been tracking the data, and there's something here that shouldn't be." Jonathan stared at the screen, his brow furrowed. "It's like a code," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "But where's it coming from?" "I don't know," Maya replied, her eyes still fixed on the pattern. "It's almost as if something on Mars is trying to communicate with us." The room fell silent. The idea was absurd. Mars was a lifeless planet, wasn't it? They had never expected to find anything alive, let alone something that could communicate. "We need to report this," Jonathan said, shaking his head in disbelief. "If this is real, it changes everything." Maya's hands hovered over the keyboard, uncertain of what to do next. She had a responsibility to the mission, to Elon, to the entire world. But this was beyond any protocol they had in place. What if this signal wasn't from Mars itself, but from something buried under the surface? Something ancient and waiting to be discovered? "Let's run more tests before we escalate this," Maya said, her voice calm but firm. "I want to be sure. If this is a signal, I need to understand it before anyone else knows." Jonathan nodded. "Agreed. I'll start running some diagnostics on the rover's communication systems. Maybe it's just a system error." But Maya wasn't convinced. Her gut told her this was something extraordinary. For the next few hours, Maya worked tirelessly to isolate the source of the signal. She adjusted frequencies, analyzed the data, and experimented with different configurations. The signal was still there, persistent and oddly regular. Then, just when she thought she might be getting closer to uncovering its origin, another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The signal wasn't just a random code. It was structured, like a message. And as Maya and Jonathan decoded it, piece by piece, they realized that it was a pattern too complex to be explained by any natural phenomenon on Mars. She took a deep breath, a sense of dread creeping over her as she finally decoded the first part of the message. It wasn't words, not in any language they recognized, but it was unmistakably artificial. The pattern was a form of communication, and it had been there all along, hidden within the rover's transmissions. This isn't random," Maya said, her voice trembling. "It's like something, wants us to hear this." Jonathan stepped closer, reading over her shoulder. "Maya, this is huge." Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of awe mixed with fear. The discovery of alien life was no longer a matter of speculation. It was real. There was something, or someone, out there, sending them a message from Mars. But who, or what, was it? "We need to escalate this," Jonathan said, his tone serious. "We can't keep this to ourselves. The world needs to know." Maya hesitated for a moment. She had always dreamed of making a groundbreaking discovery, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. The implications were massive. How would the world react to the news? Could they even handle it? "I know," Maya replied softly, her mind racing, "but we need to be careful. If this is what I think it is, it's not just a scientific breakthrough. It's a revolution." The world was about to change, and Maya had a feeling that the road ahead would be far more complicated than she could ever have anticipated. The message from Mars was only the beginning. She looked back at the screen, her mind whirling with possibilities. "Let's get to work," she said finally. "We've got a lot to figure out." The first steps had been taken. Now, the next chapter of humanity's journey to Mars, and to the stars, was unfolding before them. The discovery of the strange signal from Mars spread like wildfire through the control room. As Maya and Jonathan continued to analyze the data, they found themselves faced with an unimaginable choice. Could they risk exposing the message to the world without fully understanding its implications? Could it be a trap? Or was it, as Maya hoped, the key to a new era of human knowledge and discovery? "Do you realize what we're dealing with here?" Jonathan asked, his voice low with disbelief. "This could change everything. This is a message, Maya, an actual message, from another intelligence." Maya sat back in her chair, the weight of his words sinking in. "I know, but we can't rush into this. We don't even understand what it is yet, let alone where it came from. It could be a natural phenomenon, or worse, some kind of interference. But what if it's not? Jonathan pressed. What if this is the opportunity of a lifetime? The team continued to work tirelessly, but the pressure was mounting. The clock was ticking. They had no idea how long the signal would last, and the longer they waited, the more the world was left in the dark. The idea of revealing the discovery to the public was tempting, but Maya knew it could spark chaos. What would happen if the message turned out to be a hoax, or worse, if it contained something dangerous? Her mind kept circling back to the same question. Could they trust the signal? And if they couldn't, what consequences might they face by revealing it to the world? In the midst of her swirling thoughts, an incoming message from Elon Musk flashed on her screen. The subject line was simple, urgent. Mars signal? Maya didn't hesitate. She opened the message, bracing herself. Maya, I've seen the data. You know what this means. We can't ignore this. The world deserves to know. We will support you, but we need a decision. Now. The message was clear, and there was no mistaking Elon's tone. He was ready to move forward, to make this discovery public. But Maya's instinct told her to slow down. Elon had always been a man of bold decisions, willing to take risks, but this was different. This was a discovery that could change the very foundation of life on Earth. She stared at the screen for a long time, her finger hovering over the reply button. What if this wasn't just about science? What if this was about something far bigger, something far more dangerous? Jonathan, Maya said, her voice strained. Elon wants to go public with this. He thinks the world needs to know. Jonathan's face hardened, and he rubbed his temples, his mind clearly racing. I can't believe it. We're talking about revealing an alien signal. This isn't just a scientific breakthrough. It's a political nightmare, a cultural earthquake. The world isn't ready for this. Hell, we aren't ready for this. Maya nodded, her mind still grappling with the gravity of the situation. I agree, but we don't have much time. If we don't act soon, someone else will find the signal, and I don't know what they'll do with it. Jonathan paced back and forth. You're right, but it feels wrong, doesn't it? This feels too much, too sudden. Maya leaned forward, her hands pressed against the cool surface of the control room desk. We have to make a decision. If we expose this, the world will be watching. The ramifications could be huge, both scientifically and politically. But if we don't, we're hiding the truth. Or we're protecting the world from a truth it may not be ready for, Jonathan said quietly. Maya stared at the data on the screen, the code pulsing back at her like a silent challenge. There was no going back from this. She knew in her heart that if they revealed this to the public, everything would change. There would be no more mysteries, no more unanswered questions about what lay beyond Earth. And the pressure to make the next move, the next leap, would be overwhelming. What if this signal isn't just a message? Maya asked softly, her voice filled with a mixture of wonder and fear. What if it's a warning? Jonathan stopped pacing and looked at her. A warning of what? She didn't have an answer. All she knew was that Mars had just given humanity something it couldn't ignore. A signal, a mystery, a message that might not just be from another civilization, but from something older, something buried beneath the Martian surface, perhaps, something waiting for them. Before Jonathan could respond, Maya stood up decisively and typed a quick reply to Elon. Elon, I understand the urgency, but I need time. I'll consult with the team and come to a decision soon. This isn't just about the discovery, it's about what happens after. Let's think this through carefully. Maya hit send. The decision now set in motion. She wasn't ready to pull the trigger just yet, but she couldn't keep the world in the dark forever. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Maya called an emergency meeting with her team, gathered their thoughts, and discussed the ramifications of exposing the signal. They agreed that the world was not ready for this kind of revelation, but the pressure was mounting. Every minute they delayed felt like a risk. As the sun began to set on their temporary headquarters, Maya found herself at a crossroads. She had always been driven by curiosity, by the desire to push the boundaries of human knowledge. But now, the cost of that curiosity weighed heavily on her heart. Would she be able to live with the consequences of revealing the truth? Or would the world demand something they weren't prepared for? In the end, It wasn't just the scientific data that shaped Maya's decision. It was something deeper, a sense of responsibility to humanity. The discovery wasn't just about Mars or about technology. It was about all of them, together, stepping into the unknown. She picked up the phone and dialed Elon. "We're ready," she said, her voice steady. The moment had arrived. The world would know the truth. The signal from Mars would be revealed. But as Maya looked out the window at the vast, uncharted expanse of space, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Whatever lay ahead, humanity was no longer alone in the universe. And that truth, as terrifying as it was, would change everything. The decision had been made. Maya and her team had sent their findings to Elon Musk, who, without hesitation, made the call to disclose the discovery to the world. The world had been waiting for something like this for centuries, a signal from the cosmos. And now, the day had arrived. The implications were as profound as they were terrifying. It wasn't long before the news broke. A live broadcast was scheduled, and millions of eyes turned to screens across the globe, watching with bated breath. The signal from Mars was no longer a secret. It was being transmitted to governments, to scientific communities, and to anyone who would listen. The message that Maya had decoded, a mysterious pattern that defied all natural explanations, was about to be made public. There was no turning back now. As Maya sat in the control room, the room buzzing with activity, she couldn't help but feel a mix of awe and anxiety. The weight of the moment was crushing. She had spent years working on the Mars mission, but nothing could have prepared her for the responsibility she now carried. She glanced over at Jonathan, who was pacing nervously by the window. "Do you think they're ready for this?" he asked, his voice tight with tension. "I don't know," Maya said softly, "but they'll have to be. This is bigger than us, bigger than anything we could have imagined." The live broadcast began, and the world was soon transfixed. Elon Musk appeared on the screen, his usual confidence tempered by the gravity of the moment. His voice was steady, but there was an undeniable excitement in it, a spark that lit up the entire broadcast. "Good evening, everyone," Elon began. "What we're about to show you is the most significant discovery in the history of space exploration. For years, we've searched the stars, hoping for signs of life, for evidence that we are not alone. Today, we have found something incredible. We've intercepted a signal from Mars. Not just static, not random noise, but a deliberate pattern, a message. And today, we're going to share it with the world." Maya felt a chill run down her spine as Elon spoke. The weight of the words he was saying was more overwhelming than she could have imagined. She glanced at the screen where the signal was displayed, its strange, rhythmic pulse now publicly visible. For the first time, the world would see it. The same code that had haunted her for days. Elon continued, "This is not a hoax, and this is not an error in our systems. This is a breakthrough. We believe this signal could be the first communication from an extraterrestrial intelligence. It is unlike anything we've ever encountered before. What does it mean? We're not sure yet, but we are about to embark on a journey together to find out." A wave of shock rippled through the audience. The world had hoped for contact, for proof of life beyond Earth. But now, here it was, right in front of them. The possibilities were endless. What would the message reveal? What did it mean for humanity's future? The broadcast continued with technical details, experts explaining how the signal was deciphered and what it might indicate. Scientists from around the world began discussing the mathematical patterns found within the signal, its complexity, its precision. Some theorized it could be a form of communication. Others wondered if it was a beacon, a signal meant to lead them to something greater. But there was no consensus. The uncertainty was as thrilling as it was unsettling. As the broadcast came to a close, Elon addressed the public one last time. "We are standing on the precipice of a new era," he said, his voice filled with passion. "We have reached out to the stars, and now, the stars are reaching back. This is the beginning of something far greater than anything we can imagine. The future is here, and it starts with all of us." The screen went black, and silence fell over the control room. Maya sat motionless, her mind racing. She had spent so many sleepless nights wondering what it would feel like to reveal the signal. Now that the moment had come, it felt surreal. The world would never be the same again. But with that realization came something else. A question that had been gnawing at the back of her mind since she first decoded the signal. What would happen next? The public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded with theories, questions, and debates. Experts were interviewed. Governments issued statements. The media couldn't get enough of the story. The world was obsessed with the idea of extraterrestrial life. But not everyone was ready to accept what was happening. There were skeptics, plenty of them, who dismissed the signal as nothing more than a mistake, a natural phenomenon misinterpreted by overzealous scientists. Some even suggested it was a hoax, a way to distract the public from other global issues. They weren't willing to believe that humanity had just received its first contact from another civilization. Maya and her team were bombarded with questions. Journalists wanted to know every detail of the discovery. Was this truly a message? Could it be the start of an interplanetary conversation? Or was there something more ominous at play? The pressure was intense, and Maya felt the weight of the scrutiny on her shoulders. Despite the excitement, there was an undercurrent of fear. Some nations saw the discovery as a threat. Could this signal be an invitation, a challenge, or something more dangerous? Military agencies around the world began to take notice, sending their own teams to analyze the data. Governments began to mobilize, preparing for any eventuality. And there were whispers, rumors of other signals being intercepted, of strange occurrences happening on Earth, of something just beyond the horizon. Maya couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease. The world had received its first message from Mars, but the questions were multiplying faster than the answers. And as the days went by, Maya began to wonder, was this truly the beginning of a new era for humanity? Or was the message from Mars a harbinger of something far darker? As the world held its breath, Maya's mind raced. There was so much more to uncover. The signal was just the beginning. The next step was crucial. But what would it be? The world had erupted into chaos, and yet, amid all the questions, excitement, and fear, Maya felt a deep sense of responsibility. The signal had changed everything, but now she was more uncertain than ever. The next steps had to be calculated, deliberate. The universe had sent its message, but what did it mean? Who or what was sending it? And what did they want? In the days following the broadcast, the sheer weight of the discovery began to settle heavily on Maya's shoulders. She found herself struggling to sleep, haunted by the signal, by the unknowns it represented. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the pulsing pattern, the rhythm of an intelligence calling out from the stars. She couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. Jonathan had been by her side through all of this, constantly analyzing the signal, pushing the team to dig deeper. But as the days passed, even he began to show signs of strain. The pressure of the discovery, the scrutiny of the public, the questions they couldn't yet answer. It was all too much. "Do you think we missed something?" Maya asked him one evening, her voice barely a whisper. They were alone in the control room, the rest of the team having gone home for the night. Jonathan rubbed his eyes, exhausted. "I don't know. I've gone through the data 100 times, Maya. It doesn't add up. The signal, it's too clean, too perfect. If it were just noise, we would have been able to trace its origin, its natural source. But we can't." Maya paced the room, staring at the screens filled with data. "It's almost like it's waiting for something. For us to do something." Jonathan looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "Think about it," she said, stopping to face him. "Every time we analyze it, we discover something new. It's as if the signal is designed to be decoded in stages. It's not a one-time message. It's interactive. It's like it's testing us." Jonathan frowned, his mind racing. "A test? A signal that challenges us?" "Exactly," Maya said. "A message designed to provoke a response. But we don't know what that response is yet. We have to figure out what it wants, or we'll miss it. We can't just send a reply without understanding it fully." As she spoke, Maya felt the weight of the decision on her chest. It wasn't just about discovering a new form of life. It was about understanding what they were dealing with. If they responded prematurely, what would they be inviting? If the message was from an intelligence far more advanced than humanity, what would their first interaction be like? "I'll start analyzing it again," Jonathan said, determination creeping into his voice. We won't miss anything. There has to be a key we haven't found yet. Maya nodded, her mind swirling with possibilities. We need to go deeper. It's not just a message. It's a challenge. And I think it's asking us to prove something. Meanwhile, as the days passed, the world's reaction to the signal only grew more intense. Governments scrambled to put together task forces to investigate the message. Experts in fields ranging from astrophysics to cryptography were called in to assist with the decoding process. In every corner of the globe, discussions about the implications of the signal were ongoing. And yet, amidst all the scientific endeavors, there was an undercurrent of fear. Some believed that the message from Mars was a warning, a precursor to something far darker. Rumors spread of strange happenings in remote areas, unexplained lights in the sky, unusual electromagnetic activity, even sightings of unidentified craft. The world was on edge. Maya knew they had to stay focused. This wasn't about fear. It was about discovery. But as the pressure mounted, she began to question everything. Was this message really from an alien civilization? Or was it something else entirely? A test? A warning? Or was it the beginning of something even more inexplicable? One morning, after a particularly long night of research, Jonathan burst into the control room with a look of triumph on his face. Maya, you need to see this. He handed her a tablet, his fingers trembling slightly. The screen displayed a new sequence of data, something they hadn't seen before. Maya's heart raced as she studied the patterns. It was more complex than anything they had decoded thus far. I think we've cracked it, Jonathan said, his voice filled with awe. This sequence, it's a key, a map, and it's directing us to something. Maya's breath caught in her throat. A map? Jonathan nodded, his eyes wide with excitement. Its coordinates. On Mars. The realization hit Maya like a thunderclap. The signal wasn't just a message, it was a roadmap, a guide to something hidden, something on Mars. Where? Maya asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jonathan zoomed in on the coordinates. A location just outside the Valles Marineris. Maya's mind raced. Valles Marineris, the largest canyon system on Mars, a place of immense geological significance. But there was more. The coordinates pointed to an area that had never been explored, an uncharted region at the edge of the canyon system. An area that had long been thought to be nothing more than a barren wasteland. This is it, Maya said, the realization dawning on her. This is what the signal was leading us to. It's telling us to go there. Jonathan looked at her, his expression a mixture of excitement and concern. Maya, we can't just send a rover. We need to go there. In person. Maya swallowed hard. The idea of sending a human crew to that location was daunting, to say the least. But there was no denying it. The signal had pointed them here for a reason, and they had to follow it. Prepare the team, Maya said, her voice steady. We're going to Mars. The room fell silent as the enormity of the decision settled in. There was no going back. The journey was about to begin. A journey to uncover the truth behind the signal and to explore the mysteries that lay hidden beneath the Martian surface. But as Maya gazed at the map on the screen, a nagging feeling tugged at her heart. She had no idea what awaited them on Mars, but she knew one thing for certain. Whatever they found there would change humanity forever, and that thought, both exhilarating and terrifying, would stay with her for the rest of her life.